King's Indian defense is hands down the most deadliest weapon against d4. Hands down. I'm about to walk you through 500 to 2000, explaining all the plans, all the opening moves, all the attacking ideas, all the possible tactics in the King's Indian defense. So if you're the person who likes fun, aggressive, complex games where you attack the opponent, watch this full video and watch your rating go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, we're going to be playing one of the most aggressive lines against d4, which is the King's Indian defense. This is Gary Kasparov's favorite opening, by the way. Now, my opponent plays knight to f3. The whole idea of the King's Indian defense is to, after knight f6, we play the move pawn to g6, and we're going to be fianchettoing the bishop. Now, if you play the paired defense against e4, then the King's Indian defense against d4 is actually a very nice opening to choose because it's very, very similar. Very, very similar. My opponent plays pawn to e3. I am noticing him blocking out his dark squared bishop, but let's continue with our idea. And this is all we're going to be playing. We're going to fianchetto our bishop, we're going to castle our king, and we're going to play the move pawn to d6. And if you know anything about the pair, this is also what we do in the pair. But this is the King's Indian that we're playing now because he started off by playing pawn to d4. Knight c3 was played. Let's get our king out the center of the board. And after we get our king out the center of the board, we're now thinking about moves like pawn to d6, knight to d7, pawn to e5. My opponent decided to play pawn to e4. And what he basically did is like he saw that he blocked out his bishop. So he was like, okay, let me fix it. However, that's not how chess worked. He already wasted a move. He moves the pawn to e3, then he moves the pawn to e4. That's wasting time. What I'm going to do here, though, is play pawn to d6. We're going to be seeing this move a lot where we try to prevent the opponent from playing pawn to e5. So pawn to d6 basically just covers the square. He develops his bishop to d3. And from here, there's a few things that we could do. We could play bishop to g4 just to get rid of this knight. We could also play the move knight to d7 so that we were able to play pawn to e5. Now, playing the King's Indian defense, you're rarely going to be playing the move bishop to g4. Now, this looks like it transposed into a Pirc defense, which is kind of crazy. But we're going to be continuing with the same King's Indian plan, which is knight to d7. So bishop to g4, if you're a Pirc defense player, is one of the moves that you'd want to play. You go bishop g4, you pin the knight, you get rid of the knight. He plays bishop to e3. I mean, he's developing his pieces, so that's not bad. So just to continue with what we're doing in the spirit of the King's Indian defense, after you get a position like this, the move that you want to play is pawn to e5. Another move that you could think about is also pawn to c5. I have a student who he just didn't want to play pawn to e5 because he thinks he's blocking in his dark squared bishop, which you are blocking in your dark squared bishop if you play pawn to e5. But it's you have to know how to navigate this basically. The opponent decided to take, and in this position, we could take with the pawn and we could also take with the knight. Based on what I'm seeing, I prefer to take with the knight because if I take with the pawn, for one, he has the attacking knight, I have the defensive knight. That's uncomfortable. Two, if I take with the pawn, then my knight on d7 will be blocking my bishop on the light square. So that's also uncomfortable. So let's just take with the knight. Now, if he takes with the knight and I take back, my bishop is now free to roam. I'm just going to simply develop my pieces normally and things are going to be doing fine. Bishop to d4 was played. Quite an interesting move. He's applying pressure to my knight. He's also attacking my knight two times. I'm only guarding my knight once, so I have to be careful here. Instead of playing like a passive move, like, okay, let's move away the knight or let's defend the knight, which would be good moves, I'm going to play something that is a bit more aggressive. Now I'm going to play the move bishop to g4. Still the King's Indian defense, by the way. All of these moves I already trained on chessreps.com, so I know what the ideas are. Basically, yes, he's attacking my knight twice, but he's not able to win any material because his knight is pinned. Not only is the knight pinned, but I'm already applying pressure to the pinned knight. He took on e5, which is definitely a mistake. You don't want to be giving up your bishop for a knight this early on in the opening stage of the game. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind is this dark squared bishop now has no contestant. There's no dark squared bishop that is going to challenge my dark squared bishop. So white will never be able to attack my king because if you're trying to, anyway, let's be educational. If you're trying to attack the King's Indian, you need to attack this dark squared bishop. My opponent is being kind, he took the pawn, he didn't see the spin. So let's just take, we're 11 moves into this King's Indian video, and this guy decided to blunder his queen. So that's definitely something. He took the knight, and then from here, it's just going to be conversion. And there's a move that I'm about to play, and you're going to be seeing this a lot if you play the King's Indian. And it's whenever there's a knight on e5 and the knight is unprotected and your bishop is on the same diagonal as the knight, you could consider this move knight takes e4. You sacrifice your knight to take a pawn, but it's actually a free pawn because once their bishop takes our knight, their knight on e5 is left unprotected, and we're now able to simply take the knight. However, whenever you see a good move, you need to look for a better one. I'm actually thinking of playing queen to d4 here. Like taking the knight is just taking back the piece, but if I play queen to d4, I'm attacking his bishop and I'm attacking his knight at the same time. So it's not like he has a chance to save one of these pieces. He is still forced to lose one of them. I get my queen in the game with tempo. It's going to be so easy for me to get my rooks in the game. I think he's going to be getting checkmated very, very soon, especially if he does not castle his king. He plays pawn to f3, which means now I'm going to take with the bishop, not the queen, because once I take with the bishop, his king is not going to be going anywhere. So I'm going to be keeping his king in the center of the board, and then I'm going to be starting my attack on his king. And I'm also ahead by a queen, so this is just going to be winning. But I'm going to be walking you guys through how to play the King's Indian 500 all the way up to 2000. Ensure to like the video. My opponent decides to play knight to c3, which means the knight no longer guards this e3 square. So I'm not going to put my queen on the e3 square with check, which means the king is not going to be able to castle here. The king is not going to be able to castle here. He could move the king or block with the knight. Either way, I'm thinking of playing moves like f5 or get my rook in the game. He decided to play king to f1 instead, so we're actually just going to end the game right now. We're going to play this move bishop to d4. We're threatening a checkmate on f2. It's not easy to see how the opponent is going to prevent this checkmate. Knight to d1 would have been the move that prevented the mate. He decided to play rook to d1, so we are going to play a checkmate. More kings in the end against 600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600. Let's keep playing the King's Indian defense. Bishop to f4. This is the London system. I'm not gonna lie, I'm seeing a lot of London system against the King's Indian defense. But after e3, we're just gonna be playing bishop to g7. We're gonna be castling the king. The idea is to play pawn to d6, but my fellow 600 opponent decided to play bishop to e5. I've never seen a move like this. He's moving the bishop more than once, and I'm sure his intention is to take my knight. So without playing d6, let's just castle first. Let's see if his intention is to really take the knight, just moving the bishop so many times. Otherwise, I'm going to play d6 and chase away his bishop. Now he plays knight to d2. At least he's waiting on me to attack the bishop before he takes my knight. I mean, if he takes my knight, he's giving up a bishop for a knight. Otherwise, he's just making so many unnecessary bishop moves. Okay, so he plays bishop f4, bishop e5, bishop back to g3. That's wasting too much time, bro. Let's go knight d7 followed by e5. This is how we play the King's Indian. But then he plays knight e4. What? Bro, that's a knight. First of all, first of all, you guys shouldn't be defending or you guys shouldn't be making these types of move, Mr. Esco, let's go. Because no, why would you play knight to e4 when you have your knight on g1 that needs development. You have your bishop on f1 that needs development. You need to castle your king. Or maybe he's trying to ensure that he moves each of the pieces twice. Or maybe he's playing a game called Let's Break All the Principles. Because he blundered a knight by moving it twice. He moved his bishop more than once. Now he's developing his queen too early. Something is coming his way. Let's go knight to f6. Let's guard the knight because he's attacking our knight. Something is definitely coming his way. I'm about to trap that queen. My fellow viewers, do not play chess like Mr. Escolano from the US. Let me show you how we're going to be trapping the queen. We're going to be hitting him with bishop to g4. Now, the queen and the rook is on the same diagonal, but maybe you think after he moves the queen, I'm going to take on e1 and just win the rook. But no, Mr. Escolano. Once I hit him with bishop g4 and he moves the queen to f4, I'm gonna play pawn to g5, and the queen will have nowhere to go, and he has to give me the queen. So let's hit him with bishop to g4. That's the only square that the queen could go. The queen could only move to f4. So the queen went to f4, the only safe square on the chessboard. We do not take the rook. We play pawn to g5. Now the queen is trapped because remember, whenever you see a good move, you look for a better one first. And if you don't find a better one, then you use the good one. Okay, so he sacked the queen. Let's just take the queen. We're already ahead by a queen. 10 moves into playing the King's Indian defense. Now, I could take this bishop. I'm also threatening to take on f2. I want you guys to do the count. I'm attacking f2 twice. He's guarding f2 only once. He plays pawn to h3, and there's a lot of very nice ways to win his rook in this position. But because I'm trying to get rid of as much pieces as possible, first I'm going to take on g3 and attack his rook. So if he takes my knight, I would have took his rook. After he takes back, now I'm able to play knight f2. This is called a fork. It's very important that you guys are able to spot these fork patterns. Once he moves his rook, we're going to be taking the rook. And this bishop, in order to get this bishop on a better diagonal, we need to play pawn c5. Now, he did not decide to move any of the rooks. So let's just take the rook on h1. That's a free rook, by the way. Knight to f2 is coming, forking these rooks again. Yo, this is crazy. I'm not going to lie. The 600s in the last videos that I play, they don't really play like this. Unless it's the opening or something. I'm already ahead by 14 points. Now I'm going to be delivering a checkmate. Let's play pawn c5. The purpose of c5 is a pawn break, by the way. We're trying to open as many lines. So, for example, after he takes, we can also think about pawn b6. So, we successfully open this diagonal. If he takes the pawn or this pawn, doesn't really matter. We're going to be successfully opening the c file, and then our queen is going to join the attack. Once we have a queen, a rook, and a bishop in the attack, it's going to be game. So, he took a free pawn on g5. Let's play the move rook to c8, putting the rook on the same file as the opponent's king. He's now not able to move the pawn. He plays pawn to d4. Let's simply take the pawn. And then if he takes here, we're going to play rook takes e5, attacking the unprotected knight and attacking the king at the same time. But are we going to take the knight, or are we going to be looking for a better move? We're going to be looking for a better move. And with that being said, we have a checkmate in 2 moves. We're going to be starting with the move queen to d3, checking the king, hitting the unprotected rook. The king is not able to come to c1 or c2 because our rook covers the file. The king will be forced to go to a1, and then queen takes rook is going to be a checkmate. So let's check on d3. The king now has to go here, and the opponent resigns. But more kings in their defense against 700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 700, plays d4. You know that we're going to be playing the King's Indian defense this video, and it covers where we go pawn g6, bishop g7, get the king out the center of the board. That's the whole idea of the King's Indian defense. Now, early in the video, one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, whenever they play knight c3, it is a sign that they're going to be playing for the Joe Bava London. Against the Joe Bava London, we're going to be using the same King's Indian ideas, except one thing. We don't put the pawn on d6. We put the pawn on d5. And the reason why we're putting the pawn on d5 is so that way it's not easy for them to play e4. Because whenever they play the Joe Baba and they manage to go e4 and d4 and bishop to f4, there are some traps there that I don't want you guys to fall for. Bishop to f4 was played. Now let's continue with our regular King's Indian defense setup. Knight to b5, we're never going to be afraid of. The moment he plays knight b5, we're just going to play the move knight a6, put the knight on the edge of the board, guard the pawn, then chase away his knight. Queen to d2, that's a sign that he wants to castle on the queen side. It is also a sign that he wants to play this move, bishop to h6. Now, the dark squared bishop is like one of the main pieces in the King's Indian defense. So if you guys are watching this, try to exchange the dark squared bishop against your opponent. Now, pawn to f3 was played. Let's just get our king out the center of the board. And now if he plays bishop h6, we're not able to play bishop to h8 because the rook would be hanging. No, he plays f3 followed by e4, which is not a bad idea. If I takes, pawn takes, that's something. I'm thinking of taking though. Like takes, pawn takes, and then something like c5 to immediately start attacking his structure. Let's do that. Let's take on e4. His king is in the center of the board, so that's something that we're keeping in mind. And we also castled our king on the king side. If he castles his king on the queen side, then it's going to be a more fun way for us to attack. So he took with the pawn. I am thinking of knight c6, attacking the pawn, but I think he's just going to move the pawn. So let's play pawn to c5 first. This, you could say I'm sacrificing a pawn, but pawns like these are not good to take and very easy to get back. So he decided to push past, which d5, something I was expecting. Now I need to simply finish my development. I don't necessarily want to get my bishop out here because then after h3, I have to move the bishop again. He may want to play this move, pawn to e5, but I have a very nice idea for him. Once he, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play the move pawn to e5 myself, attacking his bishop. If he takes, because his king is in the center, well, he didn't take, but because his king is in the center of the board, I would have played moves like rook e8 and then start attacking his king. He decided to play the move bishop g5 instead, which is a decent move. I definitely need to finish my development. So let's go knight to d7. Eventually, I'm going to be finding a square for this light squared bishop. He castles his king, and to start our attack, we're going to play the move pawn to a6. Now, I'm not necessarily worried about this bishop h6 move because for one, my bishop is kind of blocked in on e5 and he has to play bishop h6, pawn h4, pawn h5 takes, then queen h6 for his attack to work. And once I play b5 here, my attack is already coming in. So I think my attack is way faster than him. So he is going for his attack and I'm going to be going for my attack. Another idea that I have in this position is to force away this knight from guarding this pawn, and then once he moves the knight, I'll be able to take the pawn. But then, even if I'm able to accomplish that, my knight is going to be pinned. So let's simply move the queen out the way. Now I want to play b4. And once the knight moves out the way, we take on e4 and we're winning a pawn. But not only am I threatening this, I'm also threatening his a2 pawn. So I want you guys to notice how this knight on c3 is overworked. Whenever you notice a piece is guarding more than one thing at the same time, one of those pieces you could take advantage of. Because let's say he moves his king over to guard this. I still play b4, and then once the knight move, I take on e4. So I'm positive that we're about to win a pawn in this position. Pawn to a3. Oh, that's an idea. But it gives me a hook though. I'm still gonna play b4. The best for white to do is actually move the knight, and then if I take, he takes my queen. But taking is bad because now my queen is able to get access to his king. I'm definitely not gonna check though, because then he's able to block with the knight. I mean, I could take here. Mm, Queen would be forced to move. But let's just take back on b4. Let's take back on b4. Let's force the knight to move. Then we take on e4. The knight went back to b1. Now we take on e4. That's a free pawn. We're attacking the opponent's queen. We're threatening to fork on f2. So, and we're also attacking his bishop. He has to ensure that wherever he moves the queen, he's guarding the f2 square. Because if he does not guard the f2 square, we're going to be forking on f2. Or light squared bishop could join the game with bishop to b7 as well. And once I'm able to move my light squared bishop to b7, I'm going to be able to play moves like rook c8. He decided to play queen to d3, did not guard the f2 square, which means knight to f2 is just a nice triple fork. I'm now attacking all his major pieces at the same time. One more thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, my dark squared bishop is no longer a bad piece because even though my pawn is blocking my bishop, I am able to simply move my bishop. Well, I am able to simply move my pawn out the way and then I'll be attacking b2. So he moves the queen. Let's take this rook, seeing that once we take here, he's going to be forced to move the queen again. We're already ahead by 6 points, by the way. Based on where he moves the queen, we could also thinking of just getting out back with the knight. He plays queen to f3. And now it's time for us to set up our checkmate. I want to play e4 just to sacrifice the pawn so that way my bishop gets the diagonal. I'm also thinking of playing queen to a1 or queen to a2 first, then play e4. Yeah, let's go with that idea. Let's go queen to a2, applying some pressure to his b pawn, so that way, if he allows us to play e4, we're going to play e4, a discovered attack on his b2 pawn, which means we're going to be attacking the b2 pawn twice, and we're going to be attacking his queen. He plays pawn to b3. Okay. Now, if I play e4, the queen could take, but I'm still able to set up tactics in this position. So e4 is just a good move in general. Now, if I play e4 and attack his queen, this is called an attraction tactic, where I kind of want him to put the queen on the e4 square. Because if you notice, the queen covers the f2 square, and by putting the queen on the e4 square, it allows my knight to get access to the f2 square, which means that's also another fort. Now he has to move the queen. We're going to be grabbing the rook. It would be nice if I'm able to checkmate him though. Like I'm thinking of queen b2 check. My bishop is covering it, but he's always going to be able to play king to d2. So unless I'm able to guard the d2 square or one of his, the guy plays queen d4. That's a queen, bro. What is this? Okay, no one c takes. The plan is now to attack his c2 pawn. So to attack the c2 pawn, I'm going to play bishop to b7, developing my bishop. But my whole idea is attacking the c2 pawn again. Remember what we talk about a lot. We talk about focal points. We talk about attacking the pawns around the opponent's king or attacking the squares that can only be guarded by the opponent's king. If you think about this whenever you're attacking chess becomes way easier for you. So he plays d6. D6 was played. It is allowing my bishop to get a better diagonal, but the whole idea is to put my rook on the c file, threatening a checkmate on c2, which is very difficult for him to prevent. He decides to play the move bishop to d3, guarding the c2 square, but then he resigns. More Kings Indian against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Play d4. Let's go knight to f6. The King's Indian defense is what we're going to be playing. Knight to f3, we're still going to be playing pawn to g6 in the spirit of the kid. And then my opponent plays e3. It blocks out this bishops though. So let's just develop our bishop here. We're just going to be castling the king and then playing pawn to d6. That's the whole idea. And then we're going to be playing knight to d7 followed by pawn to e5. So you guys should know exactly how this works. So bishop to d3 was played. Let's get our king out the center of the board. First and foremost, the opponent also got their king out the center of the board. Now we play d6, preventing any piece from coming to e5. Pawn c4 was played. Now we play the move knight to d7, followed by pawn to e5. And sometimes pawn to e4 could be a fork if the opponent is not careful. But let's play pawn to e5. Once they take on e5, I like to take with the knight. That's what I like to do because if I take with the pawn, then my knight is going to be a defensive piece. He plays pawn to b3. Pawn to e4, I would like to be a fork, but if pawn to e4, he's covering the square twice. I'm only guarding the square once. So let's play the move rook to e8. Now I'm threatening to play pawn to e4. So he has to be careful. He was not careful. He played rook to e1. Like guys, you guys should be able to spot these pawn fork patterns, to be honest. Like you guys need to be able to know that okay, whenever there's two pieces being adjacent to each other like that, putting a pawn in between them is a fork. And I also did the count. I have two pieces guarding. He only has two pieces attacking. So once he takes, I just need to take back. And then once he takes here, I just need to take back. And then just 10 moves into playing the King's Indian defense, we're already ahead by a piece. So he plays queen to c2. I mean, we could simply trade the knight. I mean, we want to trade, but if we play the move knight to f6, we're also just supporting our knight. And he wants to trade. He is asking me to trade. Let's take on e4. This is not how you do it, by the way, bro. Like, he blundered his rook, guys. But I wanted to say you don't trade pieces when you're down in material. But it's crazy, bro. Come on, man. You have to look on these bishops. Like, I've heard persons said that it's hard for them to like spot these types of bishops. So if you want to play the King's Indian or the Perk, it's very similar. You're gonna be seeing a lot of stuff like this. Let's just trade here. We're now ahead by 7 points, by the way. So our goal from here is just to trade pieces off the board. I need to finish with my development though. So let's develop the bishop. I'm just trying to take the knight, to be honest. I knew he would have just left it. This guy's playing He's playing a bit weaker than a regular 800. I'm not going to lie. Let's take the knight because now I'm just going to expose his king. I'm thinking of knight g4 hitting the two pawns, but let's give a check first. Let's force the king to move. And then once the king move, I'll simply find somewhere to put my knight. Okay, his queen is guarding the pawn. I'm not able to move forward with the knight, so I have to go back. That's fine though. Both of these pawns are unprotected, so I will be targeting those pawns. He could play moves like rook to g8 to attack my queen, but I'm thinking of queen h5 or queen f5, hitting these unprotected pawns. I definitely need to get these rooks in the game because even though I'm ahead by a rook, if I do not get my rook in the game, then am I really ahead by a rook? It's very important that you play chess with all your pieces. So king to h2 was played. Let's play queen to, it's either h5 or f5. I think the point is to attack the pawn. Let's play queen to f5. h5 would have also been good. Okay, he plays rook to g1. This guy's really just not. He's playing fast. He's not paying attention to the moves I'm making. I'm Let's just take this free pawn. Now I'm just trying to get my rooks in the game. I don't know, maybe he's going to think I blunder the knight and then take on f6. Usually the 800 play a bit stronger than this, not going to lie. Rook to g3 attacks the queen. Let's just pull the queen back. Knight to e4 could attack the rook, but I'm really prioritizing ensuring that I have all my pieces in the attack as I'm not really seeing how I'm going to be checkmating him. His queen is guarding the f2 pawn. He plays pawn to f4. The rook is guarding the e3 pawn though, but now because the pawn is no longer guarding e3, this is now just a weak backward pawn. Maybe he wants to play rook to. I think that's what he wants to play. He wants to play rook to g5, force my queen to move away, so that way his queen could take my knight. It's not a bad threat though. I'm not gonna lie. Let's play knight e4, hit the rook, threaten the g5 square. Is he? Oh, yeah. What is this guy doing? He pulls the queen back to c1. Let's just take the rook. I don't think there's even anything to learn here. Okay, the queen guards the pawn. I'm attacking the pawn. Let's play queen to d3. Apply more pressure to the pawn. He moves the king. He didn't try to defend the pawn. Let's just take the pawn. This will be checkmate in a few moves. He plays queen to g1. Now we just need to check here. That's just a free queen, but we don't necessarily want the queen. He moves the king back to h1, and here we already have checkmate in two moves. Queen to f3 check. The queen has to block, and then taking is going to be a checkmate. So let's just check on f3, and once he blocks with the queen, that's just a checkmate. But more kings in the defense against 900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Play d4. Let's go knight to f6. We're going to be playing the King's Indian defense. Knight c3 was played. This is the Joe Bava. I don't recommend that you guys play the King's Indian against the Joe Bava because there's a lot of traps in it and you guys have to know it. Once you see the knight goes to c3, they want to play pawn to e4. So we're going to be playing d5. We're still going to be playing the King's Indian setup, but we're not going to be putting the pawn on d6 because we're trying to prevent this e4 move. And then after bishop to f4, we're going to be continuing with our regular King's Indian defense setup. So let's go pawn to g6, bishop g7, castle the king. Same idea. So e3, let's go bishop to g7. We're going to be castling the king on the next move. I'm thinking about moves like pawn c5 to attack in the center of the board. This knight b5 is something that I have to be aware of as well. There's a move like a6 to prevent this move, but I don't think I need to try to prevent it just yet. He develops his bishop to d3. Let's just get our king out the center of the board. And usually we want to play moves like knight to d7, followed by pawn to d5. The opponent decided to play queen to f3. Very aggressive move. Looks like they're trying to castle on the queen side. But if they castle on the queen side, it's going to be very beneficial to us, especially since our bishop is on this diagonal. With that being said, I'm thinking of playing the move pawn c5. I'm also thinking of playing pawn to a6 to prevent knight to b5. But let's go with pawn to c5. Knight b5, I should still be able to play knight a6 and, just prevent a knight from going to the c7 square. I'm thinking of moves like knight a5 to just get rid of this dark squared bishop. I am also thinking of bishop to g4. So if he was to castle his king, then bishop to g4 would trap the queen. Like, I'm thinking of bishop to g4 no, but the queen would be able to go to the g3 square. But he plays knight to e2. And if you look on this bishop, you notice how it does not really have a lot of squares to move to, which means we are able to play pawn c4 and trap the opponent's bishop. Now, it's crazy because we're 7 moves in and we're already ahead by a piece. He plays the Joe Bava. One thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is once you see Joe Bava, d4 followed by knight c3, just don't play d6 and play d5. Prevent them from playing e4 and then just play your regular normal setup. He decided to sacrifice the bishop. Let's just take back the bishop. We are ahead by an entire piece here. So the goal from here is just to complete our development. I'm thinking about moves like knight to c6, queen a5. This same bishop to g4 is definitely still on the radar. The opponent decided to castle the king. Let's just keep developing our pieces. Regular normal development. There's nothing much happening here. I'm still trying to make this bishop to g4 move works, but bishop g4, he's just going to move the queen. There will still not be anything from here. So he plays rook to d1. The rook is on the same line as my queen. We know what to do when the opponent put their rook on the same line as your queen. Even if there's no tactic right now, just move your queen off the same line as the rook. We don't want to allow anything in the future, basically. Pawn to a3 was played. He's either trying to protect a2 or he's trying to play b4. If he plays b4, I'm going to take on b3, and my queen will also be able to take on a3. Now I'm thinking about this move, pawn to e5, in the spirit of the King's Indian. And then if he takes, I takes it the queen. And then my queen is going to be able to take on e5. And I'm just waiting to develop my light squared bishop, basically. So let's go with this idea, pawn to e5. It's very important that we are counting. If you look on the position, we have two pieces on the e5 pawn. The opponent has two pieces on the e5 pawn, which means it is fine to play a move like e5. But my fellow peeps, do you guys remember when I say the G3 square was the only square that he could move the queen to? Now he puts his bishop on G3. How do we win the game here? We hit him with bishop to G4, pinning well, it doesn't pin the queen, it traps the queen. Like, he's basically not able to move his queen anywhere. So he has to sacrifice the queen, and we're just completely winning. So he decided to sacrifice the queen. Let's just take the queen. We're now ahead by 8 points, which means whenever we get a trade, we're going to be going for the trade, unless we have some weird attack on the king and we don't want to trade any pieces off the board. But we're ahead by 8 points. All trades should be good. My knight is under attack. That those squares are not safe for the knight, and I'm also not trying to pull my knight back to b8. So let's just play knight to e7 here, applying some pressure to his pawn. I definitely need to get my rooks in the game. He should be able to play something like pawn to h3, chasing away my bishop. But let's see. So e4 was played. Now I want to play f5. And if a3, f4, that doesn't work. Oh, it does work. So I'm going to play f5. If he takes my knight takes, I'm opening the position. That's good. If he plays h3, however, I play f4, hit the bishop. If the bishop goes to h4, then I just pull back the knight and everything is normal. But the whole idea is to get my f pawn to f3, attacking this knight on e2. Okay, pawn to d6. It's a decent move. It attacks my knight, forcing my knight to move. But my knight now gets access to the c6 square. And from c6, the knight is going to d4. I'm still trying to play f4 to attack the bishop. f4 will be followed by f3 to just allow him to be pushing the pawns on the side that his king is on. That's how we basically win. Rook to d5 attacks my queen. It's crazy. He's playing some good moves, but he does not have a queen on the board. I'm thinking of playing queen b6, but there is rook to b5. So let's just pull the queen all the way back to d8. The thing is, now that my queen is on d8, it covers this diagonal. So if he allows me to play f4, his bishop will not have nowhere to go. H3, we spoke about this. Once he plays H3, we're still going to be playing pawn to F4. This is called a counter-attacking move. He attacks my 3 points. I'm just going to attack his 3 points. And I'm just doing this because I'm trying to trade pieces off the board. Like, if you're ahead by 8 points, they take, we take. We're just trying to get rid of the pieces. My knight is also going to d4 next. This should just be winning. It's completely winning. So he took my knight. Let's take the bishop. I'm expecting knight takes g3, and then I'm going to jump in with my knight to d4. So knight takes was played. Let's jump into d4 with the knight. I'm attacking this unprotected pawn. I'm thinking of moves like queen to h4. And if I could magically get rid of both of these knights, then knight to e2 would be a checkmate. It's a plan though. Let's see how he responds. Okay, so he plays rook to c1. He's guarding his pawn. We're going to play the move queen to g5, attacking the unprotected rook. We're attacking the unprotected pawn. His f2 pawn is only being guarded by the king. So keep in mind, once a pawn or a square is only being guarded by the king, these are called focal points. And these are the points that we want to be attacking around the opponent's king. He pulls the knight back, so he's trying to trade knights. He's also trying to defend his rook, but I'm going to play a very nice in between move. So obviously we want to trade, but I'm going to play the move queen to d2. What this does, I'm threatening to just win his knight for free, but if he moves his knight away, I'm now going to be able to get access to his f2 pawn. So I'm going to be able to take on f2. Well, if he moves the knight away, I'm actually able to take the rook. So my move was stronger than I expected. For example, I was basically saying if he takes my knight, I take on f2 first. But if he takes my knight, I just take his rook, and that's GG's. So he moves the king out the way, which means if I take his knight, he's going to take my queen, which means my knight on d4 is pinned. But by moving the queen to h4, he no longer guards the f2 pawn. I'm thinking about this check, but he's just going to go back. So let's take the pawn on f2. I'm threatening to play moves like rook takes knight, and then after he takes, I take here. Pawn to c3. I was definitely expecting that move, pawn to c3. But I think we already checkmated the it's not checkmate, but if you're able to find this, that's nice. So obviously, if I move my knight, I'm going to lose my queen. But what if I'm able to move my knight with a check? Because pinned pieces does not protect. His G pawn is no longer able to take due to this pin. If he pulls the king back to h1, I was going to play queen h6, but he plays king to h3. I'm still going to play queen to h6. And the reason why this is not a checkmate is because he's able to block with the knight. So once he blocks with the knight, I'm just going to be taking a free knight. So he blocks with the knight. Let's grab the free knight. I'm going to be taking on g4. Next move as well. My rook is also attacking this knight, which is the main defender of this rook. Yeah, this position is over. King's Indian defense. King to g3 attacks my rook. Not seeing any checkmate just yet, but let's get rid of the knight. Now his rook is unprotected, but checkmate is what we're going for. Already I'm seeing some checkmate in 2 or checkmate in 3 here. It all depends on what he plays, but there's checkmate in 3 at least in this position. Rook to d1, this is one of them. This is checkmating two, basically. Like once he moves the rook, I'm able to hit him with queen to f4, check. The king is now forced to go to h3. And once he moves his king to h3, that's just a checkmate. We're going to be playing more Kings Indian defense against 1,000 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,000. He plays d4. Let's just develop the knight. We're trying to play the Kings Indian defense. Bishop to f4. This is the London system that he's playing. Let's just go pawn to g6. The King's Indian defense is perfect against the London system. Against the Joe Bava London, you could still play the King's Indian defense, but just put the pawn on d5 instead of d6. He plays e3. Let's go bishop to g7. I'm going to be castling my king on the next move, and then I'm going to be playing the thematic d6 with the idea of playing e5. So knight d2 was played. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Knight f3, now we play the move pawn to d6. e5 is now the idea, but he has like 3 pieces covering the e5 square. So I have to ensure that I add some pieces covering the e5 square if I'm trying to play e5. Bishop to e3 and castle is like just regular stuff. So he did find bishop to d3. Let's go knight to d7 here. And there's actually a little idea that black players could do here. So, for example, it starts with queen to e8 and it threatens to play moves like e5, takes, followed by e4. So, pawn to h3 was played. Let's play. Is it queen to e8, rook to e8? They're both good moves. Let's actually go rook to e8 because I'm not really planning on playing f5 since I'm playing against the London. He has to play either e4 or bishop back to h2 in this position, but this is a very thematic idea. So even if it does not happen in this game, which it did, I was about to tell you guys to ensure that you do it. I want you guys to notice how he is playing the exact London system setup. But we're about to win some material here. Pawn to e5. This is called a fork, by the way. But the technique to get this fork is called marching pawns, because the pawns are going to be marching up to e4. So first, I'm going to play e5. Once he moves the bishop, I'm going to play e4, and I'm going to be ahead by a piece in 9 moves, playing the King's Indian defense. I mean, if he takes the pawn, I take back, and it's also going to be the same thing. So bishop to g5 was, oh, bishop g5 is a good move. Okay, that's why queen to e8 is the move. That's why queen e8 is the move. Now, if I play e4, he's able to play knight takes. And even if I play rook takes, he's able to play bishop takes and there's no fork. And if h6 takes, okay, let's go h6. That's why queen to e8 is the move. Because I was wondering, I see everybody play queen to e8, but I'm always like, why not just rook e8 instead of queen e8? But now I know about this bishop g5 move, which means if it happens again, we're going to be playing queen to e8. I'm threatening a fork on e4, by the way. So he has to take. And then when I take back with the knight, I'll still be threatening a fork. So he has to do something about the fork. I thought I was going to be winning a piece, but bishop g5 is a nice move. Mhm. My guy played h4. He played h4. He wants to do the fishing pole trap against the King's Indian. Guys, don't attack the King's Indian. Like, if you're gonna attack the King's Indian or the Perk or one of those openings, you have to get rid of the Fianchetto Bishop. Like, I'm just gonna take on G5 without even thinking about it. Because let's just say, let me tell you what his plan is. His plan is to get his queen to H5, which is not even possible. My pawn is covering H5. I'm ahead by a piece. I could play pawn to E4 here. And if he takes my knight, I simply take back the pawn and I'm still forking his pieces. And then eventually I'm still going to be ahead by a piece. So E4, if he takes my knight, I take back. If he takes, I take, and I'm just winning. Let's go e4. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm ahead by a piece. The goal is to trade pieces off the board once you're ahead by a piece. The rook is on this line that my king is on, but nothing is dangerous. To show you guys how not dangerous this is, first of all, even if I do not have a knight on f8 or f6, remember, there's no mate with a knight on f8. So if someone is attacking you, put a knight on f8 and then just close your eyes. You won't get mate. But even if I do not have a knight on f8 or f6, if a queen checks my king on h7, I'm just going to move to f8. So now there's a fork on e4. The position is equal now, but he's about to lose a piece, and I will still be ahead by a piece. So he decided to take with the bishop. Let's just take with the knight. If he takes with the knight, I'm going to take with the rook. We're ahead by a piece. The goal from here is to trade maybe queen c2, queen d3, attacking my rook. I'm expecting moves like that. Queen to e2 was played. Queen and the king is on the same line, but I really have no way to punish him for this because I can't get rid of this pawn. With that being said, let's just continue with our development. Another trade on f3 will be good because we need to trade pieces off the board. I'm assuming he's going to be castling his king on the queen side, and I will be playing moves like pawn to c6, queen to b6, just to start some attack on this king. So he castled the king. We're not in any rush to take the knight, by the way. If pawn c5, my queen and his rook is on the same line, so we're not able to play moves like c5 just yet. So let's play pawn c6 for now. The pawn will be going to c5 eventually because we're trying to ensure that we activate our bishop. Rook to h2 was played. He's trying to double up on the h file. I don't know. Maybe he thinks he's going to be getting something, but remember, there is no checkmate against the kid if the dark squared bishop is there. Uh, let's play queen to a5, attacking the unprotected pawn on a2. King to b1, I'm expecting. And I could even play bishop to f5, putting my bishop on the same diagonal as his king. So he did play king to b1 to guard the pawn. I'm trying to play bishop f5, but he's just going to move the king. I'm not trying to play hope chess. And then bishop e6, pawn g3, queen d5. Let's try it. Let's go bishop to f5. The bishop is on the same line as his king, so the best he should do is move his king out the way. But after he moves his king to, let's say, a1, I'm going to play bishop to e6, threatening a checkmate on a2. And then my idea is to get him to be moving those pawns on the side that his king is on. And once I could get him to move the pawns on the side that his king is on, then it's going to be easier for me to checkmate him. So he plays king to a8. Now we play bishop to e6. We're attacking the focal points. We're attacking the pawns and the squares that are only being guarded by the opponent's king. Pawn c4 is a nice way to defend here. Not gonna lie. If pawn c4, I'm gonna play pawn b5 and continue with my attack. He plays pawn to b3 instead, but because my queen is on the same line as his king, I can get away with playing bishop takes b3. And because he moves the pawn to b3, the pawn is no longer guarding c3, so I can also get away with queen takes c3. But let's just take on b3. Let's just attack his rook. Let's force the rook to move. If he plays rook to b1, queen takes c3 should be even more material. But queen takes c3 would force me to trade the queens off the board. I'm not really trying to trade the queens off the board with this attack that I have on his king. So he moves away the rook to a1. He moves the rook to a1. Again, if I take, he blocks with the queen, and I'm going to be forced to trade queens. So that being said, we're going to be playing the move pawn to c5 here. If he takes, then it's GG's, but he's not going to take. I'm going to take. And then when I take, if he takes, he loses the queen. It's weird. I also need to get this rook in the game. So maybe after takes, my rook is going to be able to get in the game. Queen takes e3 is not a bad move, by the way, guys. But just remember, I'm ahead in material and I'm trying to keep the queens on the board because I'm attack. I'm ahead by 3 points. I can play queen takes e3. And if he blocks with the queen, I take the queen and pull the bishop back. That's also a very, very easy way to win. So he moves the king out the way. He plays king to b1, which means now my bishop is really under attack. Where do we put the bishop? Let's just pull the bishop back to let's pull the bishop back to e6 actually. I want him to play knight to g5. I saw knight to g5, but I have a little idea of sacrificing my rook. Knight g5, bishop f5. If he takes the rook, then my bishops are just going to be pointing towards his king, and I can definitely cook something from that. And both of his rooks are really not doing anything on this file. So let's go bishop to f5. We saw that. It was not a blunder. He took the rook. Let's take with check. Let's force the king to move. If he puts the king here, that is still a free pawn. He blocks with the queen. We don't want to trade queens. Takes, takes. So he moves. We have to take on c3. Let's take on c3. He is able to block with the queen. And again, blocking with the queen, if I take the queen, it is completely winning. But let's just pull the queen back so that way I'm able to take and deliver a checkmate along this diagonal. Pawn to f3 is something that he could try, but then I'll just move the bishop. This rook needs to join the game. So f3 was played. Let's go bishop here. It's very important that we keep his king trapped in. He may attack the bishop again, and I do not want to play c4, but I might be forced to play c4. Unless I could... Okay, he took on b7. That was his idea. Okay, that's fine. How do we do this? If I check, he blocks with the queen. There's no threats on my king. My rook is under attack. I guess I just need to move the rook. Let's just move our rook to safety. Let's play rook to d8. The queen is guarding the rook, so there's no attacking moves on my rook. Rook to h1 still doesn't do anything. Pawn takes d4 will be the game-ending move because of these pieces pointing towards his king. In fact, I could even try to sack my queen if he moves his queen away. So he plays rook a. I think he sees what's happening with this rook a5 move. He knows what's happening, but we're still going to be taking on d4. Let's take on d4. He has to take with the pawn, and then I need to apply more pressure to this d4 pawn because the rook is guarding it, but we just need to apply more pressure to it. Oh boy, he plays rook to f4. He doesn't know what's happening. He was just trying to checkmate me on f7, but he's going to get checkmate before me because once I take on e3, that's a check. He has to block with something. The queen, it makes the most sense to block with the queen. And then once he blocks with the queen, we get rid of the queen, and then this has to lead to a checkmate. He blocks with the queen. Let's grab the queen with check. The king takes. Let's bring more pieces in the attack. That's a check. He has to move the king again. If the king goes here, this is now just checkmate. Well, it's just a checkmate. That's just a checkmate. More kings Indian against 1100 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1100. He plays d4, kings Indian defense. Knight c3, we spoke about this. It's the Joe Bava London. Let's play pawn to d5. We're still going to be playing the regular King's Indian setup, but we just don't put the pawn on d6 when they play the Joe Bava. Let's play pawn to g6 here. We're going to play bishop g7 and castle the king. Knight b5 we're not afraid of. So if they do play knight to b5, just be aware that your c7 pawn is guarded. Put your knight on the edge of the board to defend it, and then eventually you're going to be able to play pawn c6 to chase away his knight, and then pull your knight off the edge of the board. So he plays e3. Let's go bishop to g7 here. Let's just continue. We're going to be castling the king next move. Knight f3. Let's get the king out the center. And from here, I'm thinking of playing moves like c5. If this pawn is on d5, then c5 is usually a good move to play. I'm assuming my opponent is going to play moves like bishop to d3, castling the king on the king side. So it's going to be a grind. We're going to have to play some very good positional chess. Bishop to d3 was played, and my next move is interesting. Now, bishop to g4 is a nice move, but then he's going to play h3, and I have to give up my bishop. I'm actually going to play bishop to f5. Now, it looks weird. Like, okay, what if he takes the bishop? Aren't you exposing the king? First of all, my king is not exposed if he takes the bishop, but he decides to play h4. So, Oh well, let's just keep developing. If he had taken though, I would have just played e6, king h1, rook g8, and then I would start an attack. But after h4, let's play pawn c5. Knight to c6 is the next move. This is not a free pawn, by the way. It's very easy to retrieve pawns like these. If you take on c5, I'm just going to go queen a5, and that's a very easy pawn to take. I could also just develop my knight to d7, and I'm still going to be taking the pawn on c5. So he decided to take, and now that he takes, this h4 move is kind of weird because he wanted to play h5. Now once I take, I mean he could still play h5, but there's no pawn break that is there anymore. I mean, if he plays h5, he would be threatening to play h6, but he plays knight to g5 instead. Now we have a very aggressive opponent here. He's just trying to go after my king. But knight to g5, like I mean, it literally did nothing. I could just play h6 and just chase out the knight in one move. But I'm not going to do it just yet because his knight is not really threatening anything. I know that his plan is to play h5 followed by h6. So once he plays h5, that's when I'm going to play h6. Otherwise, let's just keep developing our pieces. Queen to f3. As we said, our opponent is very, very aggressive. However, by moving the queen to f3, we know what the queen is no longer doing. He removed one of the main defenders of his d4 pawn. My last move was attacking the d4 pawn. I have two pieces on d4. He only has one piece on d4. Let's take on d4. I'm also attacking the knight. If he takes, my knight jumps in and I'm attacking the queen. I think his idea is to put the queen on the same line as my king to start some stuff, but that's very easy to defend against. Let's just take. Not only am I threatening the queen, by the way, I also want to fork on c2. So he needs to be very careful. And he's playing very, very aggressive. So let's see. Is he going to play moves like queen g3? Allow me to fork? Maybe I need to play knight h5, hit the queen, hit the bishop first. Who knows? Queen to d3. Okay. He guards the pawn. He attacks my knight. The first move that jumped out to me was to play e5. Guard the knight, hit the bishop. And then after the bishop takes, I play rook to e8 with the idea of taking. But that may not work. I mean, f4 is a very easy move to find. The other thing that I'm noticing is the moment I move my knight, my f5 pawn may hang. So to guard my knight, I'm going to play the move knight to e4. My bishop comes in to the rescue to guard my knight. But then this knight is on a very nice square on e4. For example, if he takes on e4 with any of his knights, I'm able to just take back with any of my pawns, and his queen is going to be under attack. And his queen is the main defender of c2. So he pulls the bishop back. Now he's basically saying, I have two pieces attacking your knight. You only have one piece guarding it. Well, let's just play pawn to e5. No, no, we have two pieces guarding our knight. His bishop is no longer on e5. I am also threatening to play moves like f4 sometime down the line. And eventually, I definitely need to get this knight out of my half of the board. Like, if you guys are playing your games, ensure that the moment a piece is on your half of the board, you try to neutralize it. Like, I did not forget about this knight. I'm just not ready to take it. Some of you guys, while you're playing, could forget about your pieces and you could lose the game like that. So my opponent decides to castle on the queen side. In the king's Indian defense, this bishop is going to be raising havoc. No one see castle. I'm already seeing some little tactical stuff here. Like, for example, if I take this knight, he takes with the queen, knight to e2 wins the queen. However, if I take and he takes with a pawn, I am forced to move my knight. And then once I move my knight, he has two pieces on d5, and his queen is going to take on d5. So let's not rush doing that just yet. And one move I want you guys to keep in mind whenever people castle their king on the queen side is this move, queen to a5. For one, it gets the queen off the same line here. Two, we're threatening to play moves like rook to d8, putting our rook on the same line as the queen. This rook is coming to c8 to go on the king. And I have a lot of plans. For example, removing this knight would mean his a2 pawn is under attack. He took on e4, should not be good. Should not be good. The question is, how do I take back? I'm going to take with the d pawn and attack his queen. So that way it's easy for me to play rook to d8. Where will he put his queen? I'm also thinking of rook c8. All I need to do from here is just to get all my pieces in the game. And every pieces that I have is doing something except my two rooks. Especially now that he plays a move like queen to d5, I'm automatically thinking of rook c8, just hitting the queen. Okay, if rook c8, he's going to play. Yeah, let's go rook c8 actually. Rook c8 hits the queen. The queen is forced to move. He's definitely in trouble now because the move that I was thinking of is queen to d5, and I'm only ahead by a pawn, and we know that if we're attacking the opponent's king, we're not trying to trade the pieces off the board. So I was a bit hesitant about it. But if he does put his queen on d5, the plan was to go rook c5. He puts his queen on a5 instead. We're still not going to be trading queens. Remember, well, I mean, I could just take the queen actually. If I take the queen, the knight has to take, rook takes, king over, rook back to c4 is winning. Hit the knight, knight has to move, and then I'm just winning. But I think I should be able to checkmate him though if I keep the queens on the board. For example, queen to c7, lot of pressure on this knight, and then pawn to b5, chasing away the queen. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Queen takes a4 was completely winning, by the way. But I think I should still be able to win. For example, if he plays knight to d5 trying to attack my queen, I could still take on c2. But let's see what he plays here. Hmm. He took a pawn. The guy decided that, hey, I'm going to capture a free pawn. First of all, it opens this line pointing towards his king, but I have bigger stuff. I have a nice little idea here to just destroy his king. I'm actually going to play the move knight to e2 check. And this was actually my idea because his queen is no longer guarding c2. If his knight decides to take my knight, then it opens up this file for my rook and queen battery, and queen takes c2 is going to be a checkmate. With that being said, once I play the move knight to e2 check, he is forced to move the king, and then I'm going to take the knight, and his king is going to be exposed. So he didn't take. He moved his king out the way. So let's take, hit the king, hit the rook. He has to take. And then once the queen takes, then I'm still going to be threatening c2. Let's take here. We're threatening c2. If this pawn was not on e5, then queen b1 and queen a1 would have been a checkmate. But let's see how he guards the c2 square. There's queen a4, there's rook d2, and there's rook to c1. He decided to play rook to c1. Now, how I'm going to finish off this game is by simply putting a rook on the b file. Even though it's not a file for me because my pawn is there, we're going to be doing something that is called a rook lift. You guys should know about rook lift. If I play rook c6, I'm not going to be able to go here. I can't go rook c5 because he's going to take. So I'm actually going to play the move rook to c4. Now I'm threatening to play rook to b4, and that's going to be a checkmate. How does he prevent this? Think he has to play pawn to a3. Pawn to a3 is the only move that prevents my rook from going to b4. And if he plays pawn to a3, then that's where I need to start thinking of how do I finally get my dark squared bishop in the game. For example, pawn to f5, try to trap his bishop. He plays queen to b6, deciding to just give me the queen instead. He needed to play pawn a3 though, but let's give a check here. This is called a fork. The queen guards the square. The queen had to take. Let's check the king. And then once the king moves, the king has to go here, by the way. I'm still going to go back to c3 and check the king because the king is in a little net. He moves the king. Now I play pawn to f4. I'm attacking the bishop. The bishop does not have a lot of safe squares to go. Like these are the only two safe squares for the bishop. But my goal is actually not to take the bishop. I'm trying to get rid of this pawn. If I could find a way to get rid of this pawn, then it's going to be very easy for me to checkmate his king. Bishop to b6 was played. That's a that's a free bishop, by the way. But let's keep our mind focused on the checkmate. Let's play pawn to e4. And then even after he takes, the goal is to just get this pawn out of the way. And once we get this pawn out of the way, there's nothing he could do to prevent a checkmate. So he took. We're not even going to take back. We're going to play the move pawn to e4. Queen to b2 or queen to a1. He plays rook to d1, which means that's a checkmate, but that's also a checkmate. More Kings Indian against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. We're going to be playing the King's Indian defense against d4. And it looks as if he's playing the London system against the kid. It doesn't really matter though. We're still going to be playing the move pawn to g6. We're going to be developing our bishop to g7. We're going to be castling our king. So this game is like London system versus the King's Indian. My opponent, very, very kind person. He plays the move pawn e4. Didn't protect the e4 square. Well, maybe he didn't see that my knight covers the square, but my knight just covers the square. That's just a free pawn, bro. Like it would have been better for you to develop your knight, then play pawn to d4. Now he develops his bishop and he's attacking my knight. There's I could play d5 in this position, but let's just pull the knight back and just castle. So that way I'm able to show you guys the real King's Indian stuff. He plays knight c3. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Very, very solid position. Now, one thing I could say though, my opponent is developing his pieces very, very quickly, especially since I took the pawn and then I pulled back the knight. You could say I wasted a move in the opening, so I need to be a bit fast. And being a King's Indian player, whenever you see this battery right here with the queen and the bishop, they want to play bishop h6. If you're a King's Indian player, please keep your dark squared bishops on the board. How do we keep the dark squared bishop? We play the move rook to e8. And then if he plays bishop h6, which he did, we respond to this by playing the move bishop back to h8. And no, this bishop is not dangerous. Like, you're not going to be getting checkmated by this bishop by itself. The opponent decided to castle the king. Let's play pawn to d6, protecting our e5 square in the spirit of the King's Indian. Rook to e8 was played, and from here, our goal is just to develop the rest of our pieces. I'm thinking about playing this bishop to g4 move just because it's a correct move. Usually in the kid, you don't want to exchange your bishop for a knight or play moves like bishop to g4. But bishop to g4 here is just a good move because I'm threatening to take his knight and I'm also threatening to double up his pawns. So he has to defend the knight because unless he wants to put his knight on the edge of the board, which is definitely something that he could try, I'm expecting him to play something like queen e3, queen f4, rook e3. Any one of those moves should make some sense. So he did play queen to f4. I was expecting that move. Now I need to figure out how am I going to finish my development. I'm thinking takes, queen takes, knight c6. If I go immediate knight c6, there's pawn d5, and I'm not trying to pull my knight back. So I may just play the move knight to d7 here in the spirit of the King's Indian. We're just developing our pieces. We're putting the pieces where we know the pieces belong. I'm thinking of playing either e5 or pawn to c5. What I recommend that you guys play if you're going to be a King's Indian player, you want to play moves like pawn to e5. But I'm not going to lie, the guy is covering the e5 square with everything he got. So I think we're going to have to resort to playing pawn to c5 in this position because we have to do a pawn break. We just have to do a pawn break. Otherwise, the opponent is going to have too much space. So rook to e3 doesn't do much. We do not have any tactic. Let's play pawn to c5. The pawn breaks that we're doing is to allow us to get our rooks and our queen in the game. Remember, after you develop all your minor pieces, it's time for you to get your major pieces in the game. My dark squared bishop on h8 is still very good on this diagonal. This bishop on h6 is really not doing anything. Maybe you could say it is trapping my king from moving, but I do not have any intention of moving my king, and I'm in the middle game. When the opponent plays pawn to d5, he basically pushed past. He's like, hey, I'm going to keep the position close. What I'm thinking here is to take the knight, and then after the rook takes or the queen takes, play knight e5, and then I'm able to take on c4. I'm not in any rush to do this, though. I'm not going to lie. I'm also thinking of knight b6, applying some pressure to the d pawn, just attacking the d pawn twice. And then he's going to be forced to add more defense to the d pawn. But before I do this, there's an important idea that I want you guys to learn where we're going to be playing the move pawn to a6. Like, what's the purpose of pawn to a6? The purpose of pawn to a6 is to play pawn to b5. And what I'm basically doing is I'm doing a pawn storm on the queen side. Usually, you want to do a the thing is with the King's Indian, it's very, very aggressive. You could do a pawn storm in the center, on the king side, on the queen side. Because he has so many pieces on the king side, I'm not going to be moving the pieces on my king side. He plays rook to e1. All his pieces are in the game. This subscriber is watching and learning from my videos. The thing is, my pawn on e7 is guarded twice. He is attacking it twice. So I need to be slightly careful about what's happening here. But let's play pawn to b5, getting some space. I'm thinking of playing moves like pawn to b4. Pawn to b4 would be nice. Pawn to b4 would be a removing the guard tactic because my knight is guarding. Well, my knight is attacking this pawn on d5. So if I'm able to get rid of this knight on c3 with moves like pawn to b4, I could be winning a pawn. And I'm already ahead by a pawn. Very, very solid position. So he decides to play the move knight to e4, which is I don't know what to think about this move because he just left the pawn unprotected and I can't take the pawn. Because if I take the pawn, my bishop on g4 is left unprotected. I'm seeing this, by the way, because I'm applying the drawback principle. But what am I going to do? What am I going to do to fix this? First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to solve the problem of my bishop. I'm going to take on f3. Once I take on f3, I get rid of my bishop. He now has to take back on f3. I mean, he could also play knight takes f6 check. I was expecting that move. After knight takes f6 check, knight takes f6, queen takes f3, and this d pawn is guarded. That is not bad. But what if I play bishop takes f6 though? He didn't see that. Because if I play bishop takes f6, wait, let me be careful. Queen takes pawn, takes, rook takes, and I'm winning. So queen takes f6, queen takes f6, bishop takes b2, and we're ahead by a second pawn. So let's play the move bishop takes f6 in this position. We're about to be ahead by two pawns. And we know the drill once we're ahead by two pawns. We're going to start trading pieces off the board. Let's take on b2. Our position is safe. Our e7 pawn is completely guarded. I mean, he could try a move like bishop to g5 or queen to e2 or queen to e4, targeting my e7 pawn. His target should be my e7 pawn in this position, to be honest. I'm thinking about moves like knight to e5. I want to start trading pieces off the board. I'm ahead by two pawns. It's time to just get the pieces off the board and win the endgame. Queen moves over to g3. The queen is on the same line as my king, so we need to be a bit careful. Is he going to sacrifice? Definitely not. Does he want to sack here? Maybe. Takes, rook takes, but then I'm going to be fine. I'm thinking of playing bishop to e5 here, just attack the queen. Because if he plays pawn to f4, I pin the rook. If he pulls the bishop back to f4, because I'm ahead by so much points, I may consider trading the bishop and then play knight e5. Not sure though. Or do I just play pawn c4? I like pawn c4. I mean, it's an attacking move. It forces his bishop to move. He has no good forward moves on my half of the board. Yeah, let's play pawn to c4 first. Let's play pawn to c4. We're definitely thinking about all of these bishop moves. I'm thinking of bishop f6, so that way my e7 pawn is guarded. I'm thinking of bishop to e5, so that way I'm attacking his queen. And I'm thinking about bishop to d4 to attack his rook. Question is, where does he put this bishop? Bishop to f5 is indeed a move because I'm not able to take. Bishop to e2 kind of messes with the coordination of both of his rooks. He should have just pulled the bishop back to f1. He's messing with the coordination of both of his rooks. Now I'm thinking of moves like queen to a5, attacking the unprotected pawn and attacking the unprotected rook at the same time. If I play this move though, then I mean all he needs to do is move his bishop and then his rook is going to be guarded. I don't want to be too greedy. Like, I don't want my queen to be too far away from my pawn. I think he also wants to put his bishop on f3 so that way this pawn is guarded. So that's something that I need to be aware of. Bishop d4 hits the rook. He goes here, hits my bishop. What do I play here? Okay, let's start by playing bishop to e5, attacking the queen. If he puts his queen on the f3 square, then the bishop is no longer going to f3. So that's a small win for me. I'm still thinking about queen a5. I'm just trying my best not to be too greedy because he definitely has some pieces pointing towards my king. But keep in mind, if you're a King's Indian player, there will not be any crazy attack as long as you keep your dark squared bishops on the board. Now, the move that I'm about to play, it's a nice move. It's a pin. Hopefully, you guys found it. Pawn to f4. He is attacking my bishop, but once I put my bishop on d4, I'm now pinning his rook to his king. So we are about to win some material, but one thing we need to keep in mind, and it's very important that you keep this in mind, we may lose our dark squared bishop. The dark squared bishop is the life of the King's Indian. So if you're going to be losing your dark squared bishop, ensure that you really calculate so you know what's happening. And then my opponent decides to play bishop to h5. Doesn't really do much, to be honest. I mean, okay, I'm not able to take his bishop. Big deal. But what? We're definitely not going to take the rook. Please keep this idea in mind when you're playing chess. If you're pinning someone's rook to their king, do not take the rook until they try to break the pin. So I'm never going to be taking that rook unless he maybe attacks my bishop or try to move his king out the way. Then I'm going to take the rook. But for now, let's just play the move knight to f6. I mean, I don't know why the guy played bishop to h5, to be honest. Let's just play knight to f6. Now I'm attacking his bishop and he has to move the bishop away. And if he tries to, this is why you should not just be too jumpy and immediately take the rook, because sometimes when you have your opponent in positions like these, they may lose more material just trying to save the rook. So he pulls the bishop back to f3, a move that we were expecting. Again, we are threatening to take the rook, but let's not be too jumpy. Let's play the move queen to b6, applying pressure to the pin piece. And remember, we are not going to take the rook until he tries to defend the rook. If he pulls the queen back on f2, we're still not going to be taking the rook because then he's going to be pinning his queen as well. So bishop back to e1 was played. He pulls the bishop back to e1. Do we take the rook? No. What was the bishop doing on f3? The bishop was guarding the pawn on e5. Now my knight is able to take on e5, and we're applying more pressure to the pinned rook. This is why you don't want to be jumpy and take the rook. Only take the rook when he tries to break the pin. Now, if he tries to break the pin and we take the rook, we're going to be ahead by an entire rook. So he plays the move king to f2. If we take the rook, he takes with his rook, he decided to resign. I was going to win like two rooks. But let's play against 1,300 players with the kid. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300. More King's Indian defense coming your way. Knight f3, let's play pawn to g6, same idea. And I know that there will be a lot of questions in the comments saying, isn't the King's Indian and the Perk defense the exact same thing? No, the King's Indian defense you play against d4. The Perk defense you play against e4. Because they're so similar, there's a lot of times when it could transpose into, like a King's Indian can be transposed into a Perk can be transposed into a King's Indian. For example, he plays this move knight to c3, which means he wants to play e4. Now, on a regular day, whenever you see the opponent plays move like pawn to, well, knight c3 with the idea of playing pawn to e4, we usually want to play moves like d5 and just prevent it. But I'm just going to go with bishop to g7 so that way I could teach you guys as much as possible about the King's Indian defense and also the similarities with the King's Indian and the Perk. With that being said, if you play the King's Indian against d4 and then the Pirk against e4, then you don't necessarily have to go and learn another opening because they're so similar. So he plays the move pawn to e4. Let's play the move pawn to d6 in this position. The goal is to simply get my king castled. He plays h3, which means he is preventing my bishop from going to g4. Let's just get our king out the center of the board. And just to maintain the spirit of the King's Indian defense, we're going to be playing the move knight to d7 because our light squared bishop has nowhere to go. And then we're going to be playing the move pawn to e5. That's how you play the King's Indian. Bishop to e3 was played. Now let's play the move. There is also possible c5 moves in this position. Like I have a student who he prefers to play c5 instead of e5. Like for example, if e5 takes, he thinks that the dark squared bishop is not going to be as active, which is correct. It's not too bad, but c5 is also definitely a move here. But let's just play e5 just to show you guys the e5 concept. A lot of times they push pass on d5. If someone's push pass on d5, then you're going to be able to see the real King's Indian defense. If they take on e5, it's still going to be a King's Indian defense, but it's one of those lines where like the higher rated players, they usually push pass in order to gain more space in the center of the board. But then lower rated players, they're all about trading. So once a trade presents itself, they're going to accept the trade. So pawn takes was played. I'm thinking of taking with the pawn, but something that we spoke about is they are going to have the attacking knight versus my defensive knight. With that being said, I'm going to take with the knight. So that way, once I take with the knight, now I don't have to worry about where I'm going to put my bishop. My bishop is going to simply go to e6. So he took with the knight. Let's simply take back with the pawn. And now I want to play moves like pawn c6 to prevent knight d5. I want to play moves like queen e7 to prevent bishop c5. So there's two moves that I'm trying to prevent here. And it's hard to prevent both of them at the same time. If I play c6, the bishop comes to c5. If I play queen c7, the knight comes to d5. But let's play queen to e7. Knight d5 is not as threatening. I mean, if he plays knight d5, I'm just gonna take. But if he allows me to play c6 next, preventing knight d5, we're definitely gonna be playing something like this. This bishop will be developing to the e6 square. We're going to be swinging the rook over to the open d file, and all our pieces are going to be developed and very active. Pawn to a3 was played. I think I have an idea why he played this move. Two things. Maybe he notices that my queen could go to b4 on his half of the board and he's trying to prevent it. Or he wants to play b4 followed by bishop c5 to get the skewer happening here. Now, I definitely need to finish my development. So I'm actually going to play the move bishop to e6. I'm not worried about this knight going to d5 anymore because I know how to count and I have two pieces on the d5 square. If he puts the knight on d5, he's only going to have his pawn guarding it. So he plays pawn to b4. He is trying to get his bishop to the c5 square and attack my queen, but that's actually not a huge threat. I'm not going to play b6 just yet. I'm actually going to allow him to put his bishop on c5. Then I'm going to simply move my queen out the way, and then I'm going to chase away his bishop. So sometimes the opponent creates a threat where you don't necessarily have to defend against the threat, because the threat is not as forcing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take my rook off this diagonal by playing the move rook to d8. Now my rook is on the same diagonal as the queen. Yes, he's able to play bishop to c5, but then I'll just move my queen out the way. And then once I move my queen out the way, maybe I could even move my queen to d7 as well. Then I'm going to be thinking about moves like pawn to b6 and chase away the bishop. And then he's going to have to put his bishop on c5 just to pull it back to e3. So queen to e2 was played. He immediately got his queen off the same file as my rook. So yeah, this guy's definitely watching my videos. Super proud of him. I mean, bishop c5, I'm still not afraid of that bishop c5 move. One move I'm going to be playing that you guys are going to be seeing this move, by the way. Like, I was thinking about playing knight d7 to prevent bishop to c5, but that's too passive. I'm going to play the move knight to h5. What's the purpose of knight to h5? Sometimes, if the pawns are, like, for example, if there was a white pawn on d5 and a black pawn on, let's say, d6, and there's a lot of pawns in the center, then we would like to play moves like f5. But I'm not trying to play f5. I'm actually trying to play the move knight to f4, hitting the queen and hitting this bishop at the same time. And if this bishop ever decides to take on f5, then my pawn takes on f4 and my dark squared bishop gets this super long diagonal. And that's the reason why I'm telling you guys, it's okay to have this pawn on e5. The bishop is still active and there's still a lot of stuff that you could do with your bishop. He decides to play bishop to c4. He's trying to get some pieces off the board. Like, I really wanted to get some sacrificial ideas on h3. It definitely doesn't work here though. He's also trying to get his knight on the d5 square. I'm thinking of playing the move knight to f4, immediately hit the queen. If he takes with the bishop, then I take, and then his knight is going to be pinned to the rook, so he has to deal with that. If he moves the knight, I take, then I take the rook. So let's play knight to f4. I'm actively attacking his queen, so he has to respond to it. And because the queen is the only defender of his c4 bishop, he has to take on f4. Once he takes on f4, I take back on f4, and my bishop gets this very long diagonal, and his knight is already going to be pinned. So he took on f4. Let's take back on f4. Pawn to f3, I will always keep in mind. I'm always going to be thinking about moves like pawn to f3. Because pawn to f3, I mean, you could say I'm threatening to play f3, and if the queen takes, I take the bishop, but I'm also assuming that he's going to take on e6, and then I'm going to take back, unless bishop takes c3 is just a very nice in-between move. So he just took a bishop. He took a bishop. What if I take a knight and attack his rook? And if he moves the rook, I take the bishop and I'm ahead by a piece. Wait, I take a knight, he moves the bishop, I take the rook, he takes back, and I'm ahead in material. Yeah, I'm not going to take back the bishop. We're not going to be taking back the bishop. Taking the knight is just winning here. Let's just take the knight. And as I tell you guys before, the dark squared bishop is the life of the kid. I'm attacking the rook, and now I'm attacking the light squared bishop. What is he going to do to save both of them at the same time? If he moves the bishop, I take the rook. If he moves the rook, I take the bishop. It's actually better for him to save the bishop and lose the rook in this position. For example, if you guys are able to do maths properly, if he moves the rook and allow me to take the bishop, I'm going to be taking 3 points. But if he moves away the bishop, allow me to take his rook, then take back my bishop, his rook is 5, my bishop is 3. I'm going to be losing 3, gaining 5. So I'm only going to be getting 2 points. He decides to save the bishop. Not bad. No, I'm just going to take his rook. If he takes attack my rook, I just move my bishop out the way. And if he takes, I takes, and I'm ahead by a bishop. Let's just take the rook. Now this is just completely winning. He decided to take back. The rook is an unprotected piece. I still want to play f3, but f3 doesn't do anything now. Oh boy. His queen is on the same line as my queen. And because the queen is on the same line as my queen, it means the pawn is pinned, and pinned pieces does not protect. With that being said, I'm able to take his bishop on d5. Because once I take the bishop on d5, he can't take my rook. That's a free bishop, unless he wants to lose a queen. So no, well, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm just ahead by a rook in this position. And being ahead by a rook, we know the drill. We're going to be trade, 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 and then we're going to be winning the endgame. On c4 was played. He is attacking my rook. Let's play the move rook to d4. You could say I'm in the endgame, so it is time to attack pawns. He plays f3 to guard the pawn. Now I play rook to d8, doubling up my rooks on the only file that is on the chessboard. He plays king to h2, and it is time to start setting up a checkmate. Remember what I teach you guys about attacking the opponent's king? Always try to attack those squares around the opponent's king. With that being said, especially since my pawn is already guarding this g3 square, I'm going to play the move queen to h5. Someone in the comments says I need to face the mic like this. So that's the reason why the mic is like this. So let me know if you guys are hearing me properly like this, or maybe I have to do this, or maybe I have to shout like this, which I'm not going to be shouting like that the entire time. I'm not trying to destroy my voice. But from here, I'm just going to check on g3, play rook to d2. He plays rook to g1. He's really trying to protect the g1 square. Let's play the move queen to g3, forcing the king to move. And then once he moves the king, hit him with rook to d2, putting my rook on the second rank. He is forced to move the queen. Not really. Okay, so he puts the queen here. I'm thinking of playing this, which is winning. Like he's gonna sack his queen for the two rooks, but it is winning. But I'm trying to be as precise as possible. So let's play the move rook to f2. I'm also setting up the nastiest queen sacrifice. I'm not gonna be giving any hints, but if you guys are able to see the queen sacrifice that I'm setting up, then you have some potential to get better at chess. Now we have two rooks on the second rank. If you could have one rook on the second rank or the seventh rank, then that's good. If you could have two rooks on the second or the seventh rank, then it's over. It's GG's, and the opponent has to resign. He's probably going to resign now. But let me know in the comments if you see the queen sacrifice that is about to hit him. Well, he resigns. More Kings Indian against 1,400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,400. Let's go knight f6. We're going to be playing the King's Indian defense. Knight c3 is an indication that they're trying to play the Joe Bava London. I'm not going to lie, the King's Indian defense against the Joe Bava London is, I wouldn't recommend playing the King's Indian against the Joe Bava London, because after g6, e4, bg7, d6, after bishop f4, there's a little trap in the Joe Bava that I don't like. So I'm actually going to be playing pawn to d5, preventing the pawn from coming to e4, but I'm still going to be using the King's Indian setup. So he plays pawn to e3, which is weird. I thought he was going to play the Joe Bava. He just decided to block out his bishop. Let's just continue with our idea. Let's go g6. We're going to be playing bishop g7 and castle or king. He puts his bishop on d3. Let's go bishop to g7 here. Okay, now he plays pawn to d4. So he's just wasting time. Why did he play e3 then e4? Why didn't he just play bishop to d3 then e4 in one move? I think he's already losing a pawn here because this pawn is just unprotected. Once I take on e4, my queen is now attacking the pawn. If he takes with the bishop, I take the okay, he took with the knight. Now I'm able to we are not able to take on d4. This was a test. I'm testing you guys. If we take on d4, bishop to b5 loses the queen. Don't be blundering like that. With that being said, let's take on e4 first. Once we take on e4, my bishop is targeting this pawn. Now I'm attacking the pawn twice. Now we take on d4 and we're ahead by a pawn. So we won a pawn at move 7. We're already ahead by a pawn at move 7. It's an end game. I know everybody wants to get videos on the end game. I'm getting a lot of videos. Hey bro, let's see an end game. This will be an end game. So this should be something that you learned from. That being said, whenever you're playing the end game, getting your king to safety is important. Attacking the opponent's weak pawns is also important. I wouldn't really classify this as an endgame though. There's still a lot of minor pieces on the board. So I'm still going to be castling my king. I'm not going to be marching my king in the center. So he took with the queen. Let's just take with the bishop. I'm expecting knight f3, tempo on my bishop. Let's just pull back the bishop. I am ahead by a pawn in this position. This bishop on this diagonal is very strong. Whenever you see the opponent's bishop on these types of diagonals, you want to play moves like pawn to c6 and prevent the opponent's bishop from being active. But my opponent is just being a good Samaritan. He develops his bishop. I mean, he's trying to be principled, but moving the bishop to e3 has a drawback. Remember, guys, talk to your pieces. Ask them, what are you doing on c8? I'm guarding b2. Okay, I'm not going to move you away. But let's just take on b2. Now he has to move his rook away. And the good thing is, maybe he thinks after he moves his rook, I'm going to move my bishop and then he's going to take on b7. But once he moves the rook, I'm going to be able to check on c3 first. So he's attacking my bishop. Let's check on c3. My b7 pawn is under attack twice, by the way. So we need to be careful. What I'm not going to do is move my bishop and allow him to take on b7. He's trying to trade bishops. I'm ahead by 2 pawns. By all means, be my guest. We are going to be trading once we're ahead in material. He took with the knight. Now we play the move pawn to c6. This is what I wanted to tell you guys. Pawn c6 means his bishop is kind of being played out of the game. What are you doing on c8, Mr. Bishop, before I move you? I'm guarding b7. Okay, fine. I'm not going to move the bishop. I'm not necessarily in any rush to castle. Like, you don't really want to castle your king in the end game, but I'm definitely going to be castling my king so that way I'm able to get my rooks in the game. But I think I have more important things to deal with instead of castling. For example, I need to move my bishop, but the rook is being annoying. So I'm going to play the move knight to d7, trying to play moves like knight c5, hit the bishop, guarding the pawn on b7, then moving my bishop away. You notice what I did? I talked to my pieces. That's all. I just asked my bishop a simple question, and he told me that he's guarding b7. Some of you guys are not doing that, bro, and that's crazy. So rook to e8 was played. The rook is on the same line as my king. Let's not play around. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. We don't play around with that. If you see the rook on the same line as your king, or the rook on the same line as your queen, or the bishop on the same line as your king or your queen, get out of there. So he pulled his bishop back to f3. By pulling the bishop back to f3 means his rook is now active, attacking my pawn on e7. Now, I could play a move like pawn to e6, but that would block my bishop out. So first I'm going to play the move rook to e8, just guarding the pawn like this one now. Again, I want to put my knight on c5, guarding b7. Then I'm going to be able to develop my bishop. With that being said, if he plays a move like knight e4 or knight b3, then he would be covering the c5 square. He didn't, though. He plays rook b4. He wants to do this and apply more pressure to my e7 pawn. But let's just go knight c5. That was the initial plan. Okay, if he plays rook to c5, that would be annoying. Rook to c5 would be very annoying because I'm not gonna pull my knight back to. Well, I could actually go knight d7 back to b6, hit the rook, develop my bishop. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So now that he plays rook to c4, it is an annoying move. I was thinking about putting my knight here, but it blocks out the bishop. So I'm actually gonna play the move knight d7 with the plan of playing knight b6, and then I'm gonna be able to develop my bishop. Patience is very, very important whenever you play the end game. You really don't want to be rushing in the end game. He's doubling up his rooks on my e7 pawn. I'm only guarding my pawn once. He's attacking it twice. So let's play king to f8. Now I'm guarding the pawn twice. The plan from here is to play knight to b6. And then after knight to b6, finally develop my bishop. Bishop to f5 was played. Did he just blunder a rook? Pawn to f5 is a fork. Rook to f4, I'm not able to take the bishop. But then pawn to e5 attacks the rook. But then he's able to pull the rook back to f3. And then pawn to e4 attacks the rook again. Then knight takes wins a pawn. Let's play f5. Let's go with f5. I don't think I'm going to be winning a piece, to be honest. He has this rook to f4 move, and then my pawn is going to be pinned. But I'm still going to be playing e4 just to attack his rook. And then once the rook move, I'll just continue to play regular chess. He thinks he's losing. He's actually messaging me in the chat saying, that was a mistake. Now you'll win. Okay, he found the move. So he's able to save his bishop. But let's continue with our plan. Pawn to e4, attacking the rook. The rook is forced to move. Now, if he pulls his rook back to f3 and I play e4 and he takes on e4, am I able to just move the king and that's a fork? I think I'm able to just move the king and that's a fork. But rook back to f3 is definitely the move that he has to play that move. Otherwise, he's going to lose the bishop. So I don't know why he's thinking about it. So the rook went back to f3. Let's think. Pawn to f4, right? Pawn e4, knight takes e4, king g7, knight d6. Okay. Oh, the knight is pinned backside. So e4, knight takes e4, King G7, the knight is pinned. He's also forked. So bishop takes, rook takes, and then knight to f6. Okay, there's a lot of ways to win this. I like the idea of knight to f6. I think knight to f6 could, let's say I go knight to f6. Knight f6, bishop back, has to move the bishop. Pawn e4, hits the rook. Rook here, pawn g5, traps the rook. But if knight f6, bishop back, pawn e4, he's just going to move his rook to a random square. The good thing is, I am playing this bishop out of the game. E4 takes. I found it. I found the move. The move is e4. Pawn to e4. If knight takes e4, my knight gets access to this e5 square, and it will be attacking both the rook and the bishop at the same time. And then once the rook moves, I'll simply take the bishop and I'm winning. So he kind of has to move the rook now. And the funny thing is, okay, he found it. He found knight takes e4, but he's in trouble. Knight to e5, bro. Your rook is under attack, and you don't really have any fancy moves because I'm going to take your rook with a check. And the funny thing is, after he moves the rook and I take this, his knight is also going to be pinned to his rook. So he's about to just lose all his pieces on the chessboard. So rook to f4 was played. We saw this coming. Knight takes g4 is the move that I'm going to play. And after knight takes g4, his knight is now pinned. His knight has nowhere to go because if he moves the knight, he's going to get checkmated. So I'm now ahead by a piece and I'm about to win another piece. Okay, so he plays h3. He's basically saying, okay, let me attack your knight. But I just need to move my knight. In fact, I just need to put my knight. Okay, do I play knight? I think I have to play knight f6. Let's go knight to f6. Knight f6, the knight is not able to take because he's going to lose the rook. And I'm also threatening to take the knight. He could try pawn to f3 to guard the knight. Because if I take with the pawn, he's going to take my rook. But then I'm just going to move my king, then take the knight. Like everything is just pinned. He will be losing another piece here. So he did play pawn to f3. We saw that. If we take his knight, he's going to take our knight. So we have to move our king to guard the knight and ensure that once we move our king, his knight is not able to check. And then on the next move, we're definitely going to be taking that knight because he's still not allowed to move the knight. Remember, when a piece is pinned, we apply pressure to it. That's just 101 stuff. King to f2, I'll take the knight. This is just GG's. And it's crazy because I did all of this without moving my bishop on c8 or my rook on a8. So he moves the king. Let's grab the knight. It's over now because my knight is now being guarded. He could try taking with the pawn, but then I'm just going to finally finish my development. He also only has 30 seconds on the clock. So he took, let's finish our development. Maybe he pushes and attack my knight, but I'm just going to move the knight. So he attacks the knight. Let's play knight d5, hit the rook. We're forcing the rook to move. And then once he moves the rook out the way, I'm going to be using the f file. Or I could also put one of my rooks on the d file as well. Rook to a5. Let's check the king. Guy has 3 seconds on his clock. It's crazy. He has 0 seconds on his clock. But that being said, we're going to be playing more Kings Indian against players at the 1500 level. Do stick around. Oh, he has a second on the clock. What the hell? Okay, stick around. Our opponent is now 1500. We're playing some Kings Indian defense. C4, we play G6, Bishop G7, Knight C3. They want to play E4. We go Bishop to G7. And then when they play E4, we're going to be playing D6. And this is the King's Indian defense. D6 is to prevent the pawn from going to E5. And I'm just going to castle, play Knight D7, play E5. So he develops his Bishop to D3. Let's get our king out the center of the board. And then he develops the bishop to e3. You know, he's pretty principled player. Let's go knight to d7, followed by e5, you know, just keeping it in the spirit of the kid. Knight e2 is interesting. I was actually expecting knight f3, but let's continue with our plan. Let's go e5 here. If he push, then we should be able to play moves like knight c5. If he takes, taking with the knight or the pawn is something. Okay, he plays f4. F4 is an interesting move. He already made 4 pawn moves, and we're in the opening stage of the game. Now, which one of these pawns do we take? If I take the f pawn, he has 3 very nice pawns. I think I need to take the d pawn so that way I'm able to attack the e pawn. So let's take the d pawn here. Once he's not able to play e5 comfortably, we should be fine. So he took with the bishop. I have One piece on e4. He already has two though, but let's go rook to e8 here. Now we have two, and I'm thinking of knight c5 here. So he castles the king. Let's go knight c5. Knight c5. Now we have three pieces attacking this e4 pawn. If he's going to be giving up his bishop for a knight, then I would be okay with that. I don't think it's a terrible move though. Like takes, and then he plays e5 would be good. Okay, he just pulled his bishop back to d3. He saved the bishop. Maybe he thinks I wanted the bishop. But one, two, three attackers versus one, two defenders. That's a pawn. We're 11 moves into the kit and we're already ahead by a pawn. Let's take on e4. Now, he could take on g7 first. This is interesting. And then once I take with the king, he plays queen to d4, check, checking my king and attacking my knight at the same time. But if he plays queen to d4, I should be able to play queen to f6. So queen to d4, queen f6. If he takes, then I take, and then I take, and I'm winning. I could also block with the knight, but that's a bit annoying. Let's just block with the queen. We're already ahead by a pawn. We're just going to be playing the end game and grinding out the end game. Now, I get a lot of comments talking about how to play the end game. The end game is not something where I could just make a video and be like, this is what you do in the end game. You know, it's best if I show you guys what to do in the end game. So again, in the end game, we do things like attack the opponent's pawns, push our pass pawns or try to create pass pawns, ensure that we get our king activated and in the game. But this may be an end game, so I'm going to be explaining it to you guys. Okay, he plays queen to d5. He does not want an end game because he's about to be down in material, so pretty principled guy. Queen to d5 seems a bit inaccurate to me, though. I mean, that's not necessarily a free pawn. I mean, it is a free pawn because then if he takes my knight, I take his knight and I'm attacking his bishop. But that looks like a very risky pawn. I'm thinking of just playing pawn to c6 and attack the queen. And then I could even think about capturing this pawn afterwards. Let's just get the queen out of our half of the board. We don't want the opponent's pieces on our half. He could still pull the queen back to d4, but we're ahead by a pawn. We're going to be winning the endgame if he wants an endgame. So queen to d3, he does not want to trade. He's very principled. That's a pawn, though. That is a pawn. And yes, my e4 pawn is under attack twice. My e4 knight is under attack twice, but he's not going to sack his queen. I'm going to take a pawn. If he pushes, I take this pawn. If he plays rook to b, whoa. Oh, yeah, if he plays rook to b1, I just pull back to f6 and I'm fine. Let's take the pawn. This is how you win when the ratings start getting higher. You get a pawn, you take the pawn, you play a few defensive moves, and then you just consolidate. But you have to be able to defend properly. And if you know how to defend properly, then you kind of have to know how to attack properly. So that way you're able to predict their attacking moves and then defend it before it happens and so on. Now he plays knight to d4. He's really plotting against my queen. Like my queen could be trapped here, so I have to be a bit careful. But I'm thinking of just a regular knight c5, to be honest. Just attack his queen. His queen has to ensure that it stays guarding this knight. So where will he put the queen? Here. He's going to put the queen here. And then once he puts the queen here, I should be able to get this square for my queen. Or even queen back to... Why don't I just play queen back to b6 and pin the knight? And then if rook to b1, I play queen c5. The knight is still pinned. So he's going to move his king. What do I play here? Okay, better yet. Better yet. Let's play... Let's play queen c3. Let's get the queens off the board. That's my plan. I'm trying to force the queens off the board. But he doesn't want to trade because he's down in material. But I'm ahead by two pawns. If I'm able to trade the queens, then the end game is going to be even easier to play. So queen to e2 was played. He really didn't want to trade the queens off the board. So he chose to lose the queen. Because first of all, the queen was not guarding the knight, so that's a free knight check. If he moves the king, knight g3, and we win the queen. Otherwise, after I take here, he has to just block with the rook. Oh, my knight is pinned. But I'm just going to take the rook. I'm about to be ahead by an entire rook because he doesn't want to trade queens. Let's just take on d4. And if he blocks with the rook, this rook is gone. So he moves the king out the way. This is called a discovered attack. By the way, guys, my rook is on the same line as his queen. So once I move my knight out the way with check, he has to take my knight. And then we grab the queen. And now we're winning the game. We're also attacking his unprotected bishop. The plan from here is to get my queen around these squares. Remember we said these are called focal points. The pawns, the squares around the opponent's king. That's what we want to attack. So rook to d1. Let's go here, hit the bishop, threaten to take on g2. He pulls the bishop back. Now we take the pawn. This will be a checkmate on the next move if he's not careful. And the only move that I'm seeing to guard it is rook to g1. And if he plays rook to g1, I have a very nice idea. So after he plays rook to g1, never mind. That's just a checkmate. But more kings in the end against 1600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. B4, it's going to be the kings in the end defense. Now, c4, we're going to be playing g6. This is usually how the King's Indian defense happens. For example, knight c3, we go bishop to g7, and then they play pawn to e4. Now, this is King's Indian defense. After e4, it means they're threatening to play e5. Okay, but then he decides to play e3 and then he blocks out his bishop. So let's just castle our king. We're still going to be playing the regular stuff. He develops his knight. Let's play pawn to d6 in the spirit of the King's Indian defense. And then after bishop to d3, we play the move knight to d7. He castles the king. I'm thinking of playing e5 here. Let's definitely go e5. That's the whole idea. You get the setup, you put your knight on d7, and then you play pawn to e5. And if he plays pawn to d5, then he's basically trying to close the position, and it will allow our knight to get access to the c5 square. We're going to be playing moves like a5 to prevent b4. This is all King's Indian defense idea. Okay, so he took on e5. One move I like to play is knight takes instead of pawn takes, because if I takes, then my knight is going to be doing a defensive role the entire game. So let's take with the knight, hitting the bishop. If he takes, then my pawn takes, and development from here is going to be very easy. Like the queen goes to e7, the rook goes to d8. He did not take though. He pulls the bishop back to e2. But let's just continue with the plan. Let's go queen to e7. Eventually, I would love to put my rook on the same line as his queen. If he takes on e5, we're always going to be taking with the knight. Knight to d5 could be annoying in some variations. If knight to d5 now, though, I'm just going to take the knight. That doesn't really do anything. Otherwise, bishop to e6 could also be an idea. So he did play knight to d5. Let's just take on d5. And I think he needs to take with the queen here to maintain some level of plus. If he takes with the pawn, then he's blocking the file for his queen. So he did take with the queen. Okay, the queen is on my half of the board, so we definitely need to deal with that. I'm thinking bishop e6, but the bishop told me that it was guarding b7. So let's play the move pawn to c6, chasing away the queen, forcing the queen to move. And then once he moves the queen, I play bishop to e6, and then my development is going to be complete. It's going to be, I mean, he kind of has to pull the queen all the way back to d1, which means he just wasted some time. You know, you put the queen on d5 just to pull it back to d1. Now I'm just going to go bishop to e6. All my minor pieces are developed. My king is castled. My rooks are connected. His queen is still on the back rank. His bishop is still on the back rank. And I'm targeting the c4 pawn twice. So he has to be careful. He took on e5. I was expecting that move. He basically eliminated one of the attacking pieces on his pawn. I'm thinking of taking with the bishop just so that my bishop maintains this diagonal. But my d6 pawn is a backward pawn. So let's just take with the pawn so that way my rooks are able to join the game very easily. Queen c2, not bad. He's moving his queen off this file. That's not bad at all. Thinking of bishop f5, but there's just pawn e4. Let's just get our rook in the game. Rook to d8. Rooks needs open files, so we're just going to be getting the rooks on the open files. Bishop to d2 was played. Not bad. Do I have anything though? Bishop to f5, hit the queen. If pawn to e4, the queen guards the bishop, so I take, and if the queen takes, my rook takes the bishop, and I'm winning a pawn. He's trying to put his bishop here. So let's go bishop to f5 and attack the queen. He has to be careful. He has to ensure that the queen stay guarding the bishop. So queen to c1 or queen to c3 are the moves that he has to play. If queen c3, he puts the queen on the same diagonal as my bishop, so he has to play queen c1, which is definitely not a move that he signed up for. Very uncomfortable move to play. So he did pull the queen back to c1. Now I'm thinking, I want to go bishop to d6, takes, bishop c3, rook d8, and then I'm going to have complete control over the only file on the board. That has to be the correct thing to play here. Let's go bishop to d3. Once he takes, I'm basically threatening to double up on the d file. And once I double up, or maybe even triple up on the d file, then I'm going to be able to say I have an advantage because there's only one file on the board. And if all my major pieces are on the file, then I should be fine. So he didn't take, he decided to play rook to e1. He's really applying the to take is a mistake idea. But now I want to play e4. And if he takes, play pawn takes. E4, there's bishop to c3, takes, rook d3, hits the queen. Hmm. Let's play e4. It opens up this diagonal for my bishop, but I am assuming that he's going to play bishop to c3. So the only advantage that I think I have in this scenario is the open d file. So I really need to use the open d file to my advantage. Okay, so bishop c3 was played, was expecting that. And how did we say we're going to be responding to this again? Takes, queen takes, rook d3 hits the queen, queen has to move, rook to d8, doubling upon the d file, and then I have an advantage. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take on c3. Queen has to take. Remember to only trade when it improves your position, by the way. But all of these trades that I'm doing doesn't really improve the opponent's position. For example, once he takes with the rook, it's hard for him to easily get a rook on the d file. Now I'm going to play the move rook to d3, hitting the queen, which is forced to move. And then I'm going to be following up with rook to d8. And I have full control over the file. So queen back to c2 was played. Now once I play rook to d8, there's no rook going to d2 and there's no rook going to d1. He decided to play rook to e1. Guys, this is what I mean when I say your rooks should not be pointing towards your own pawn. That's just ugly. Okay, there's another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind. Yes, I have control over the d file, but what? How do I win the game? We're going to be using something called the principle of two weaknesses, where we're going to try to create another weakness in the opponent's position. I'm actually going to play this move, pawn to h5. My plan is actually to push the pawn all the way up to h3. So he decided to play h3 very, very quickly. So that's not bad. How do we continue here? Centralizing the queen is also something that you want to be doing in the endgame. I'm also thinking of playing g5 followed by g4 to start an attack on his king, but it's definitely something that needs to be prepared. So let's play king to h7 in case I need to quickly swing my rook on the g file. Now, this position that I have it's just a better position. Whenever you have a better position, this is where persons don't know how to convert a better position. Just because you're better doesn't mean you need to immediately find the winning blow and win the game. Just be patient. The opponent doesn't know what to do. For example, he just plays h3, it's not a blunder, but then if he plays b4, I'm going to be winning a pawn. With that being said, let's play the move pawn to g5. Now we're going to start our attack on the king side. Queen to a4 was played. He is attacking my unprotected pawn on c5. I'm thinking of playing queen to c5, but then he's if b4 I takes, he's gonna take. Don't like the idea of that. b6 is also something. Let's play. No, we can't play b6. b6 we lose this. So let's play a6. a6 to guard the pawn, and then we continue with our kingside attack. Queen to a5, not a bad move. My g pawn is not necessarily under attack, but then if I push the pawn here, then it's gonna be under attack. So we need to solve this issue. Maybe king g6 f5 is also an idea. Okay, I'm going to play the move king to g6 here. I have another plan to win this game. If I'm able to take this game to an end game, my rooks are going to be more active than him. My king is already on g6, so my king is also going to be more active than his. So I'm going to be doing fine. Rook to c1 was played. He disconnected his rooks. Maybe he wants to push this, doesn't do much. I'm thinking of just playing f5 here. I'm still thinking about playing g4, but g4 takes. I'm not really seeing the huge benefit that I get from that. So let's just play a move like queen to e6, just slowly improving our position, protecting the g4 square. If pawn push takes, I may, big may though, play queen takes. It's better to keep the queen in the center of the board. Now he plays rook to c1. Not sure why he's trying to double up on the c file. If I check takes and then check king up, do I have anything? If I check king up, check, he blocks. I don't have anything. So let's play g5 here. Same idea. If takes, I play pawn takes and then check and then takes. Okay, he plays h4. Now I'm thinking of g3. You have to create weaknesses around the. Oh, if I play g3, he's gonna play queen g5. We have to be careful. So let's play f5. Let's prevent the queen from coming over, but then he's able to play g3. So what kingside attack am I talking about? Okay, I don't think I have any kingside attack, but we could definitely try to win in the end game. Let's play king to f6. I want to play queen to e5. Yeah, he plays king g7. Now let's go queen to e5. I want to trade the queens off the board and win the end game with the better rooks. So he definitely defended well, though. He definitely defended well. We also have the same amount of time on the clock, so he's is playing some chess. I'm not sure if he wants to keep the queens on the board or take the queens off the board. Like in both scenarios, I'm better. So he decided to keep the queens on the board. He played queen to b4. Now I'm going to hit him with pawn. Oh, he's attacking my pawn here. We have to be careful. And if I play rook here, his queen gets access to f8. So with that being said, let's play queen to e7. Still guarding the pawn, but I'm attacking the queen, so the queen still has to move. Maybe he's going to put the queen back on a5. Queen to b6, he's not trading queens. He's not going to be trading the queens off the board. He's trying to target here. Okay, how are we going to win this game? How are we going to win this game? Yeah, let's go rook to d7 here, applying some more defense to the pawn, so that way my queen is a bit easier to roam around. I'm really thinking about this move pawn to f4, by the way. Like, I'm thinking about f4, and then if he takes with the g pawn, I play g3, and then it's going to be weakening his king. And I'm also thinking about f4 takes, and then if my queen is able to take this pawn, that's going to be weakening his king. And if he takes with the e pawn, I'm able to play e3, and that's going to be weakening his king. So pawn to c5 was played. My pawn here is guarded. The queen is not creating any huge threats. I'm trying to make the move f5 work. So let's move the king out the way. So that way, if I play f5 and he takes with the pawn, I'm able to take here. Queen back to b4. Let's calculate. Push, takes, takes. Maybe he goes rook here. And then I pull my queen back and play h4. Push, takes, push, takes, takes. And then that should be winning. Nice. Let's play f4. F4 is a very nice move. Oh boy. F4 is tricky. He's actually able to take with the G pawn. Oh, I forgot to ask my pawn what it was doing. Because if he had taken with the G pawn and I take on H4, his queen would have been able to take here. But he decided to take with the E pawn. So let's just continue with pawn to E3. Now he's really not able to take, but my whole idea is just to weaken his king. I want to be able to play moves like queen to E4 check. Obviously, his queen is guarding, so I may play rook to D4, and then once he moves the queen, I play queen to E4 check. Pawn to F5 would definitely be an idea. Queen to C4 is also a move because queen to c4 threatens queen to g8 check. It's very important that you look on those moves where the opponent is able to move their pieces forward towards your half of the board. With that being said, let's just play the move king to h7, preventing the queen from coming to G8. Remember, you're trying to ensure that you prevent the opponent's king from entering into your position. But then he plays rook to E2. So if I take his pawn, he takes my queen. But I'm actually going to play the move rook to D4 first, attacking his queen. And then when he moves the queen, that's when I'm going to play queen to E4 check. And I'm not seeing any checkmate, but it looks very, very dangerous. Queen to C2 was played. He's pinning my rook, but we're still going to be playing the move queen to E4 check. No, my rook is no longer pinned, but all my pieces are on the same diagonal. That can't be the most comfortable thing to do. So he's going to move his king. Question is, what do I play when he moves his king? If I check here, he takes with the rook. Okay, that doesn't work. If I check here, he takes with this rook. Oh, and then I check here. Oh, yeah, we got him. Takes, rook takes, then I'm going to be able to take here. If king takes, I'm able to check here. So let's check on f2. It's a very, very tricky scenario. And remember that I already sacrificed a pawn. So me winning this pawn doesn't mean I'm ahead by a pawn. He took with the rook. Let's give a check here. My queen is also pinned. So I'm not able to like deliver any checkmate if he goes king to f1. So, and I have 49 seconds on the clock. So king to f1. If king f1, I'm going to play rook to d3, so that way my queen is no longer pinned, which means I'm now able to play queen to h1, which will lead to a checkmate. This was actually a very nice attack. This guy played some chess. So he played rook e1, and to close the game, we're going to check on h1. The king has to go here, and then queen e3 is going to be a checkmate. So let's check on h1. The king has to go here, and that's a checkmate. More Kings Indian against 1700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. We know what's coming his way. This is the kid. And if c4, we go g6, bishop to f4. He's playing the London versus the kid. It's fine. Pawn to g6 is good. If knight c3, remember to play d5. So knight c3 was played. Once they play knight c3, you're now playing against a Joe Bava. Joe Bava players, they want to play e4. And if you play d6, they play e5. And a trap is involved in that. So let's just play d5. Let's prevent him from playing e4. And then we simply develop like the regular kings in the end and play normally. So he did play knight b5. Now we have to play knight to a6 here, just putting our knight on the edge of the board, but we're going to be able to play pawn to c6 and just chase his knight off the edge of the board whenever we want. And then we're going to be able to pull our knight back to c7. So never be afraid of this knight b5 move. Pawn e3, let's just develop our bishop. The plan is just to castle the king here. I've seen players pull the knight back to c3 with the idea of just taking on e6. Bishop e3, let's simply castle the king. This is regular kid stuff. Pawn c6 is now my plan. I'd love to play pawn c6, and I'm also thinking of playing knight to b4 to attack this bishop. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm going to do. So a piece is on our half of the board. What do? We chase that piece out of our half of the board. This is called neutralizing. And then once the knight goes back, my knight is on the edge of the board. Knights do not belong on the edge of the board. So we play knight to b4, attack the bishop. I think what he needs to do though is pull the bishop back to e2, but then I'm going to go bishop f5 and apply more pressure to c2. And then he needs to play rook to c1. And then only after that, he should play pawn to a3 and chase away my knight. Otherwise, he's going to just allow me to take his bishop, which he did. Now I'm just going to take his bishop. And just like that, we could say we have the bishop here, which is not the biggest advantage. But once you're getting stronger at chess, you have to take or learn to take the smallest advantage that you got. And then eventually over time, when these small advantage add up over time, that's how you're going to see the bigger picture. So he plays queen takes d3. My bishop is the last piece that is not yet developed. Let's simply develop the bishop. And we also gain a tempo on the opponent's queen. Now he has to move the queen. And then I'm thinking of moves like knight to h5. Knight to h5 would mean I'm hitting this bishop, and I could be playing with two bishops versus two knights. Anytime you have the bishop here, which is two bishops versus a bishop and a knight, or two bishops versus two knights, your goal or your plan will be to open the position as best as possible. And when we say open the position, we're thinking about pawn breaks. So he could try to play bishop to e5, but that's actually going to help me because I'm going to play f6. And then once he pulls the bishop back, I take the bishop, then play e5. Rook to e1 is an interesting move. He's basically saying, I'm going to allow you to take the bishop, but then I'm gonna be controlling the e5 square so many times, you're never gonna be able to play e5. And that's interesting. That's super interesting. And I think he's gonna try to play h3 and pull the bishop back to h2. But only if he plays h2, that's when I'm gonna take the bishop. Otherwise, I'm not gonna take the bishop. I'm thinking of playing queen b6, hitting this pawn. I'm thinking of just playing f6 with the idea of e5. There's also just queen to d7 to connect the rooks. Let's start with rook to e8 here. Let's start with rook to e8 because maybe I'm going to be able to play f6 e5, or maybe my rook has to stay on e8. I'm also trying to see if he notices the h3 bishop h2 idea, because I don't necessarily want to take the bishop this way. I'd prefer for him to pull the bishop back, then I take. So because I don't want to take the bishop this way, if he plays h3, that could be him forcing me to take this way, which is what he did. And now he's just planning on pulling the bishop back. So let's just take. Now he's going to take back. There are also ideas of pawn to g4, which would be attacking my bishop. So I need to be careful about that. Okay, here I'm going to play queen to b6, attacking this unprotected pawn on b2. My opponent is playing some chess here. I'm not going to lie. My my plan is to trade a few pawns. Like, I don't necessarily want to trade all the pawns off the board, but knights prefer the pawn cluster. So if I'm not able to get some of these pawns off the board, then he could argue that his knights may be better than my bishops. Knight a5, interesting move. He's attacking my queen and protecting the b2 pawn. I'm thinking of queen b5, but then he plays knight c4. Well, knight c3. Well, then I'm just going to take. So queen b5, knight c5. I could just take a pawn. Okay, queen b5 is just attacking the knight. Yeah, let's just attack the knight. If he pulls the knight back, I could take a free pawn. So what's the idea? Is he going to play b3 to protect the knight? But that would mean he's putting his knight on the edge of the board. That's kind of weird. So he did play b3. I'm thinking of playing bishop to e4 here. Okay, bishop e4, he does have knight g5. It looks like he also wants to put his knight on c5. So we're going to be playing a prophylactic move, pawn to b6, preventing the knight from going to c5. But I'm desperately trying to just open some lines. No, especially since he plays b3. My bishop on g7 is actually a bit stronger, especially since his rook is on a1. So I'm assuming he's going to move his rook off a1. Otherwise, I'm going to be able to play c5 and take on d4. He plays rook to c1. Now do I play c5? c5, knight back to c3, hits the queen and the pawn. And if I move, he takes. And if I take back, I lose this pawn. c4, I'm not afraid of because I'm just going to take. So I'm going to get this rook in the game first. Let's play rook to d8. And I want you guys to notice how I'm getting my rooks in the game, but my rooks are actually just pointing towards my own pawns. But that's where I think the action is going to be. So we definitely need to do some pawn breaks to get the rooks in the game as well. So I think I'm able to break on c5, eventually e5. It's going to be very hard to break on e5. The c file could also be open, but I'm just trying to guard the d5 pawn. So that way, if I play c5 and he attacks the queen and the pawn, I could say the d5 pawn is already guarded and all I'll need to do is move. So pawn c4, that appears to be a mistake because once I take on c4, he has to take with his rook and not the pawn because the pawn is guarding the knight. And if he has to take with the rook, this is now just an isolated pawn. And I am thinking of playing pawn to c5 because his queen is pinned. I'm also thinking of playing bishop e6 to hit the rook, but definitely pawn c5. And see, I don't think he understands what's happening in the position. Like just the basic stuff like if you have the two knights, keep the position closed. If you have the two bishops, open the position. But pawn c5, knight c3, move the queen somewhere safe. This is still pinned. We're going to take and open the position somewhere. So let's go pawn c5. If knight c3, I'm going to pull my queen back to it's either d7 or a6. c6 is on the same line as his rook. That could cause drama. a6 is kind of out of the whoa. The guy just thought about it and then he took it. I was expecting, yo, that's crazy. Dude blundered his queen. Now he's crying in the chat. And then he resigns. But more Kings Indian against 1,800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,800. Let's play some Kings Indian defense. C4, we play G6. This is going to be mainline kid, knight C3, bishop G7. And then once they go E4, we play D6, preventing E5. Knight F3 is the more classical variation. H3, H3 is definitely a move. Let's get working out the center of the board first. And then he develops his knight. Maybe he's not trying to get his knight pinned. But let's go knight to D7, followed by E5, just continuing with the regular idea. After this bishop E2 move, we play E5. And then after d5, the goal is now to attack the c4 pawn. So we play knight c5. Now we have two pieces attacking e4. Queen c2 guards e4. And now he wants to play b4 to chase away the knight. So we have to play a5, preventing b4. Now the opponent castles the king. And then from here, we're trying to play moves like f5. So already I'm thinking of knight h5 to f4. I'm also thinking of just bishop to d7, just to ensure that I'm able to play a4 if I have to. But let's go knight h5. Knight h5, the knight could go to f5. The pawn could go to f4. Bishop e3 I'm expecting here. Whenever they play a3, you play a4. Bishop g5 hits the queen. Let's just attack the bishop. I mean, I'm planning on playing f5 anyway, so I'm not necessarily wasting a lot of time. If bishop back to e3, now I'm thinking of f5. And I'm assuming he's going to go back to g5. But let's still play f5. Going back to g5, I'm not afraid of. I could go bishop f6 and I could go knight f6. Especially since I want to put my knight on f4 and I don't want his bishop to take. We're going to be playing bishop to f6 here. And my bishop doesn't necessarily really have the diagonal, so he's not trading. Let's play rook to f7. Rook to f7 is a key move in the King's Indian. This bishop is not doing anything on h6, by the way. We're not afraid of anything. Knight f4 is what we want to play. Bishop to d7 is also an idea. And then we also want to play moves like f4. If we're able to play f4, his bishop on h6 could just be getting trapped. Knight to h2. Looks like he's trying to take on h5, but the plan was to play knight to f4. I mean, I'm also thinking of taking on e4 here. But knight to f4 is definitely the idea. Hit the bishop. If he takes on f4, I take, and then my dark squared bishop gets a very nice diagonal. Otherwise, I may want to take followed by bishop to f5, applying some pressure to his pinned knight. But there's always ideas like g5 to trap the bishop. I just don't want to be too premature with it. For example, g5, some bishop h5 ideas. Let's see. Up to f3, okay. He's adding some additional defense to his e4 pawn. But because my bishop does not have the long diagonal, I'm thinking bishop to g5, forcing the bishops off the board. Bishop g5 takes queen g5, threatening h3, so he has to play king h1. I don't really gain anything from that though. That's the thing. Now, let's just play a natural developing move. Let's go bishop to d7. Let's just play a natural developing move. Trying to figure out how to continue my attack. Bishop to g5 I really like because my queen gets this square. But once he plays king h1, I'm just not seeing my attack. So whenever they play a3 in the King's Indian, you want to respond to a3 with a4 always. Now, b4 is going to be impossible because obviously if he plays b4, I'm able to en passant. And I'm now threatening to play moves like knight b3 hits the rook followed by knight d4, hit the queen and the bishop. So a3 was actually a huge mistake. So this is something that, and it's very, very thematic in the King's Indian. So what White needed to do is White needed to play b3 followed by a3 followed by b4. So that way when he plays b3, I'm not able to play a4. And once the pawn goes here, if I play a4, he still just plays b4. But now once he does this, this is tricky now, very, very tricky. Because now I have an immediate plan. Rook to e1, he got his rook in the game before I even attacked it. Knight d3 hits the rook. I'm still thinking of knight to b3. Knight b3, knight e2, take followed by knight d4, and you could say I have a very strong knight. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go knight to b3. This is called a maneuver, by the way. And the opponent's d4 square is a weak square. Because remember, once a square is not being able to be guarded by a pawn, then it's a weak square. He's never going to be able to play g3 because he's going to lose this pawn. And if he takes here, I takes, and my bishop gets the diagonal. So I think I'm doing fine here. And if knight back takes, rook takes, he's fart. Bishop takes, knight d4, I take the pawn, queen takes, bishop f5. Hmm. Queen to d1. Do I play knight a5 and attack this weak pawn? Okay, let's not play knight a5. Knight a5, knight a4, knight c4 though. Knight a5, bishop e2. Then I play bishop g5. And then after takes, I'm threatening mate and f3. Yo, is this a move? Let's go knight a5. Because c4 is also weak. He's not able to play b3. If knight takes, I takes, his knight and his pawn is under attack. Pawn to c5 though. Pawn to c5 looks like it could be a move. But bishop to e2, okay, so he took. He just ignored the threat and took. Makes some sense. I'm definitely going to take back with the pawn. I don't want any piece going to the f5 square. Let's say I take with the pawn, he takes. Now I have double pawns. That's kind of weird though. It's definitely kind of weird. Knight c4 and my knight is unprotected, so I have to be careful. If he takes here, then I take back. If I take with the bishop, knight e4, bishop e4, not sure. If I take with the bishop, he takes here, I take here. Hmm. Let's take with the pawn. I'm going to go ahead and take with the pawn. Bishop takes. I have ugly double pawns, but my f pawn prevents both of his knights from coming to e4 and g4. So yes, I have double pawns, but I'm doing fine. After takes, I'm also thinking of king to h8, queen to d8, rook to g7, and put all my pieces on the g file to attack his king. And if he plays bishop e2, bishop to g5. So he took, let's take. Okay, this is the very interesting position. This is very ugly. Queen d2 hits the pawn, I takes, queen takes, knight e5. I also have the bishop here. I'm not worried. My f pawn is actually one of my best pieces. I may lose this pawn, but my f pawn is preventing his pieces from going forward. And that's what you want. Queen to d3 was played. So he guards the pawn with the queen. Knight b3 back to c5 is an idea, but I want to keep my knight there. If I could just have his queen play the defensive role for the remainder of the game, I'm good with that. So let's continue with our plan. Let's play king to h8. Move the king out the way so that way my queen could get access to the g file, and I could also try to swing this rook in the game. Bishop h5, my rook is under attack. If rook g7, there's rook, oh, there's no rook e1. So rook g7, there's no rook e1, knight f3, queen g8. Let's do that. Rook g7, there's no rook e8. I'm fine. My bishop guards the square. F5 pawn is still doing a lot of work. If the knight comes to f3, queen to g8, and g2 is under attack. How does he guard g2 though? It's over now. Queen g8. That was the plan. And this is something thematic that you guys want to use in the King's Indian. Definitely attack on the g file. So moving your king to h8 and then scoot over your pieces to attack on the g file. Thematic. How does he guard the g2 pawn? Knight h4 I take, pawn g3 I take. It's okay. He moves the king out the way, which makes some sense. So he's basically sacking the pawn, and then rook here I takes rook here, and then he gets the g file. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, do I want to take that pawn now? Yo, it's a pawn. Let's take the pawn. I'm ahead by a pawn. Rook to g1, I take. Rook takes, I go queen to f8, and I'm safe. I'm ahead by a pawn. I'm threatening to play queen to h6. His bishop is unprotected, and his h3 pawn is unprotected. His king is not the safest. So if I'm able to play this queen to h6 move, his bishop is either trapped or he's getting mated or he's losing the queen. Because if the bishop goes here, I take, and if knight blocks, I take the queen. And this is what I mean by giving your opponents problems to solve. Now he plays knight to g5. If queen to h6, knight f7 is mate. He is also threatening knight f7. Oh, this is crazy though. Because if I takes, rook takes, rook takes, queen h6, queen d4 is GG's. That's interesting. Hmm. Takes, rook takes, c5. c5 prevents queen d4. And if pawn takes, I play knight takes, and then my knight prevents the checks. Okay, that's what I have to go with. Otherwise, knight f7 is mate. Bishop to e8 is something, but there's also knight e6 hits the queen. No, there's no knight. Yeah, there is knight e6. Let's take. Let's take. Rook takes. There's also queen f6. Queen f6 hits the rook and prevent this. But I'm trying to play queen h6. So pawn c5 is my idea. Pawn c5, if he en passant my knight joins the game. If knight d5, queen h6 hits the rook, hits the bishop. Okay, now it's a complicated game. But that's the King's Indian. If you're ready for the complex positions, play the King's Indian. Also, if he takes with the pawn, I could take with the bishop, but I prefer to take with my knight. So that way I cover these squares. Like whenever you have positions where you're defending, the best way to do it is check to see what are the possible ways in which the opponent could check your king. And once you cover all the possible ways in which the opponent could check your king, then you should be safe. Knight d5, I'm assuming. Queen h6, pawn h4, rook g8. And then if I'm able to get rid of this rook, his bishop has no good squares to go. And he has a minute on the clock, so we're going to win this game. Knight to b5 is a nice move. He still wants to check on c3, but I'm able to block on e5. He's attacking d6 twice. I'm not able to guard it twice. So I have to counterattack. Queen to h6. Queen h6, pawn h4, knight e5, queen d6, check here, king move. Um, okay, it's getting a bit tricky. It's getting a bit tricky. Well, let's go queen h6. Let's go queen h6, hit the rook. If queen check, I go knight e5. h4 he has to play. That's what we saw. Now I'm thinking rook g8. If he checks, I go here. If queen d6, I take knight takes maybe. Because if knight e5, queen d6, bishop c6, king g8. Okay, let's go knight e5. Let's hit the queen. It's getting very tricky now. Bishop c6 checks the king. King g1, king h2. If king h2, I'm thinking knight to f3, bishop takes f3, queen takes h4, check, hit the rook. Okay, king h2, knight f3, bishop takes f3, queen takes h4, check. If once he moves the king, I take the rook with check and I win the game. Let's go knight f3. Knight f3, he moves the king. Okay, let's go knight f3. I have to play fast. It's weird though, because he's able to move the king. Well, if he moves the king here, I take with check. And if he moves the king here, then I also take with check. That's the thing. So if he takes, I'm winning. And if he moves the king, I'm able to take the rook with check. Nice. Tell you about the King's Indian. These are the types of positions that you get. After bishop takes f3, I don't take the bishop, obviously. My queen is hanging, mate is hanging, but we take on h4 with check. The king has to step on the g file. Then we take on g5 with check. Then we take the bishop, and we're winning. So let's take. This was crazy. Now the queen move we take here. Any check we block with the queen. We don't mind trading. We're ahead by an entire rook. He checks. We block with the queen. And he lost on time. More Kings Indian against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. Let's play some real Kings Indian defense. Knight to f3. Let's continue. Pawn to g6, bishop to g7. We're going to castle the king. Bishop f4. Let's go bishop g7. We're basically playing the King's Indian versus the Joe Bava because he puts the knight on c3. Remember what we said about the Joe Bava. Once they puts the knight on c3, don't allow them to play pawn to e4. So we're going to play the move pawn to d5. And we're not afraid of knight b5 because we have knight c6. Queen d2 was played. Let's get the king out the center of the board. And I am assuming white wants to castle on the queen side. Bishop to h6 is what I'm thinking of. He plays knight to e5 though. He wants to play moves like f3, g4, h4, some aggressive stuff, but we definitely need to ensure that we counter in the center of the board with our pawn break. So let's go pawn c5. I'm also thinking of knight e4. I'm assuming e3 is going to come. Now there's no more bishop h6, but he should be able to push these pawns up the board. Okay, we're going to be continuing with our development. Let's go knight to c6 here. Our light squared bishop is now the only piece that needs development. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to be doing with this bishop just yet. So let's maybe start our attack first, or let's just see what the opponent does. Bishop to e2. Maybe he wants to castle the king. And now I'm thinking takes, queen b6, apply some pressure to both b2 and d4. There will be knight takes c6, but I'm able to take with the pawn and my bishop gets the a6 square. So let's go with that idea. One thing I'm changing in the position though is some bishop to h6 idea is now possible because the pawn is no longer on e3. But let's go queen to b6 here. Now I have two pieces attacking d4 and I'm attacking his b2 pawn. He could castle on the queen side, by the way. But he didn't castle on the queen side. This was what I was expecting. Let's take with the pawn. And my only piece that needs development, this bishop, is going to a6. I'm attacking b2, but I have no intentions of taking b2. b2 is probably also a poison pawn. If I take on b2, wait, is my queen getting trapped if I take on b2? Because if it's a free pawn, it's a free pawn. If he puts the rook here, I go here. If this rook comes here, I go back to a5. My queen is not trapped. If takes, knight here, my queen goes to a3. The knight is under attack. My queen is not trapped. That's a free pawn. Ensure that you guys are calculating. You notice how I'm aware of the risk that are associated with taking the b2 pawn. Don't just take the b2 pawn like, okay, there's nothing guarding the pawn. Let's just take the free pawn. That's not how I look on it. How I look on it is a free pawn, and I have to be careful while taking those pawns, or else my queen will get trapped. So I look on the position and then I'm like, hmm, will my queen get trapped? And if the queen is not getting trapped, it's a pawn. Rook b1 hits the queen, queen to a3. That's what I saw. And my queen is going to a5 next. A5 is the only square once the rook goes to b3. But again, I had to see this. And then I'm going to be pinning his knight, which means if he moves the knight, I'll trade the queens and I'll already be ahead by a pawn. The good thing about the King's Indian defense is it's very hard for the opponent to attack the kid, especially when they castle on the king side, because usually they want to trade off this bishop, they want to push a few pawns on the king, and it's a lot of stuff. And I don't want to tell you guys what to play in the opening stage of the game. You should be the ones who watch the videos, choose the opening that fits your style, fits your personality, and learn as much from that opening. Now, rook to b3, we go queen a5. We spoke about this, but just a little recommendation: the King's Indian defense and the Pyrrhic defense, they are so close together. It's kind of like the same plans. One starts where pawn d4 is played, one starts where pawn e4 is played. So if you play both of them, it's you're gonna have an easy time learning the opening. I am ahead by a pawn, but this guy has crazy activity. And he's controlling the b file, and his bishop is also covering b8. So how do I play this position? All right, my bishop is the only piece that is not yet developed. Let's just go bishop to a6. We already spoke about this. Trading off this bishop, and then all my other pieces are going to be active. Bishop takes, let's simply take back. Rook to b7 is definitely a move that I'm like, okay, that's kind of invasive. You know, he's putting his rook on my seventh rank very, very early. What I saw though is once I play e6, it's hard for him to attack and win my pawns. And I want you guys to notice what I did. I eliminated my light squared bishop. Now my plan is to put my pawns on the light squares. Usually moves like knight to h5 make sense, but bishop to e5 could be something. So rook to b7 was played. I was expecting that he is attacking my pawn. If I play pawn to e6, it will allow bishop to d6 and attack my rook, which is not very threatening. But I think eventually I'm going to have to do something with this rook anyway. So let's play rook to e8 first. It still guards the pawn. I'm still trying to get my rook in the game. I'm thinking of knight h5, bishop e5, f6, followed by e5. That's a risky plan, but if he allows it, then I'm sure black is going to be better. Then he plays rook to c7. The guy wants to put not one, but both of his rooks on the seventh rank. If he manages to put both of his rooks on the seventh rank, then you have to at least say he gets some compensation. But what I will do is play the move rook to c8. My a rook was not doing anything. I'm just trying to eliminate one of these rooks. So if he still puts his rook on the seventh rank, I take, the rook takes, and it's not as dangerous. And keep in mind, I'm ahead by a pawn. So at the higher level, you have to really grind out a win. You know, so once I'm able to trade the pieces off the board, burn his time down a bit more, then I should be able to win this game. I have 6 minutes on the clock. He has 4 minutes on the clock. So I have two advantages so far. Let's take on c7. The rook will take back, I'm supposing. And now I'm looking for different ways to infiltrate in his half of the board. Knight h5, I want to work. Pawn e6, still not seeing what that does. Queen c4, there's rook a7. Knight e4 takes. And that does not give me anything. Okay, rook to b8 is very risky and very bad, and it does not work because my rook is going to be on the same line as the bishop. Let's play knight to h5. We have to play some attacking move. Let's attack the bishop. If the bishop goes back, we just take. If the bishop goes back to e3, I'll hit him with e5. But then if I play e5, he takes, and my a7 pawn could be hanging. So bishop back to e3 is not bad. Bishop e3, though, means his rook could be possibly trapped with queen b6. Wait, how strong is knight h5? I don't think he's even able to move that bishop. And if he's not able to move the bishop, he's gonna have to allow me to take, then his queen take back. I think his rook is kind of trapped. We need two. That's an interesting move. That's a very interesting move. The guy left his bishop unprotected, but if I take his rook, he takes my unprotected queen. And if I take his queen, the knight takes and guard his bishop. But then I'm able to take his bishop. And then once the knight takes, the knight is no longer guarding the d4 pawn. And I'm able to take the d4 pawn, but then there's nothing guarding my c6 pawn, and he'll just take my pawn on c6. What I'm thinking of then is to play queen to b6. Just move over the queen and attack the rook. Oh, okay, wait. If I hit the rook, right? He could take here, but then I'm gonna take, and then if the queen takes, I play knight takes f4 because his bishop is unprotected. And if he checks, I block with the bishop and I'm fine. Otherwise, I'm just threatening to take the bishop. Otherwise, he has to guard the bishop. And then once I take the bishop, queen takes, I'm able to play bishop takes d4, attack the unprotected knight. And if the queen takes my bishop, his rook is hanging. Queen to b6 has to be the move here. Let's hit him with queen to b6. That's the move. And in some positions, his back rank is also weak. So whenever I take on d4, I'm immediately threatening to eliminate his knight, and I'm immediately threatening to put my queen on his back rank. Think someone is in trouble here. Rooks belong on the seventh, but not my seventh. You know, you put your rook on my seventh, then this is what's gonna happen to you. And I'm also attacking this, but then bishop to d6, I did not see. If I take the bishop, he takes my rook. The good thing is his d4 pawn is just unprotected. How do I take the d4 pawn is the question. Do I play queen takes and just attack the knight? And if rook takes, queen takes? No, because if I take the knight, I'm mated. That's not a bad move, sir. I'm thinking of e5 here. Yo, that's a nice move. Okay. Bishop takes, hit the knight. Rook takes, hits my rook. Bishop takes f2, check. Because if the queen takes, I win the rook, but then he's just gonna move. All right, this is tricky, very tricky. Push, pawn takes, e6. I think I have to play e6. Takes, h6, check, king up takes. Okay, let's do it. This is so risky, it's crazy, but we're gonna do it. So we're attacking the knight. If he takes, I take. And then after queen takes, he's threatening checkmate on the back rank. So I'm going to play h6, which means if he checks, my king runs to h7. This is called creating loft. The thing is, my f7 pawn is going to be unprotected. If the queen takes on f7, I take his knight. So in that scenario, he has to save the knight first. Then I'll guard my pawn. But he has to be creative while saving the knight because I'm not only going to be attacking the knight, I'm going to be threatening some checkmating ideas on the back rank. So he took. Let's quickly take back because the time is now ticking. And then once the queen takes, his knight is unprotected. If I take the knight, queen to e1, and I'm going to be checkmated. So I'm going to play the move pawn to h6, creating loft. Now look on this. If he checks, I go king up. My king is safe. His knight is unprotected. I am ahead by a pawn. So how is he going to guard the unprotected knight, prevent a checkmate, and do it with 1.5 minutes on his clock? Let's see, because he has been finding some good moves. Bishop to b4. Tell you about this guy, He has been finding some moves because he didn't move the knight, and there's no way to check him on the back rank. Okay, I'm thinking of bishop f6, but he's gonna check my king on the next move. Pawn to c5. He's just gonna take. Why not just knight to f4? Doesn't do much. Knight back to f6 prevents queen here. Okay, let's get. I think I need to get the knight back in the game. Okay, I need to be aggressive. Let's go knight f4. Knight f6 was my plan to prevent this check. If he checks, I'm going to go king up. And if he takes, I'm going to take the bishop. Same idea. I think his queen is slightly overworked here. He has a minute on the clock and I have like 139. I want you guys to notice how all my pieces are coordinated and protecting each other as well. It's very crucial in the end game that you have this. The only unprotected piece that I have is the pawn on c6, and immediately the opponent could try to check, king up, and then take. The good thing is his piece coordination is kind of bad. He plays pawn to g3, immediately attacks my knight, and he's basically saying, I'm creating left for my king. But now I'm thinking of just checking on h3, and then I'm attacking both f2 and so check king up, king takes, and then I check here. The king goes here. I check king up, check king back. That's mate. Okay. Check king up, king up, check. King g5, I check here. And if the king goes here, that's mate. Check king up, king up, check. King h4, I check here first. Oh, but then if he goes king here, I'm not able to check because the pawn is not there. But let's go check. Once the king move, I think I have to take with the knight then. So take with the knight it is. Let's take with the knight. Check, I go king up. And then now he takes, I take his bishop, and his knight is left hanging. And if he takes my knight, I take his knight, and I'm ahead. So he decided to sack his knight first, but I'm just going to take the knight. I'm very safe here. And once the queen takes, I check. Very nice. The time is also running out, and he's offering to trade queens, which is bad for the endgame. Now I just need to play g5. The queens are going to be off the board, and this is just winning. He moves the king. Let's just give a check, forcing the king back, and then continue to get my king in the game. And once he takes and I takes back, I have a pass pawn. It's now just over. Now I'm just going to run my king to his pawns and win the game. But he also does not have enough time. But all I'm doing is just running my king to his pawns to win the game. He played very well though. No pass pawns must be. Do not stalemate this game. Let's go here. Let's go here. Okay, let's just run to the other pawn. That's too much to think, and then just pre-move this up the board. That's too much thinking. Now I queen, cut off the king. Yo, he's pre-moving. Let's get another queen. Check, check. Don't stalemate. Oh, I won. More Kings Indian against 2,000 people. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000. We're going to be playing more Kings Indian defense. Knight f3, let's just go g6. It's the same idea. We're going to go bishop g7. We're going to be castling our king. And yes, the king's Indian defense and the Pyrrhic defense, they are related. My opponent decides to play pawn to c3. He's basically trying to cut off this diagonal for my bishop, but we should be doing fine. I'm still going to be castling my king. I'm still going to be playing pawn to d6. Very, very similar to the Pyrrhic, but this is the king's Indian defense. Knight d2 was played. He wants to play e4. Usually pawn to d5 is a good move here. So anybody who is watching this, if they try to play e4 and you're able to play d5 to prevent the pawn from going to e4, that's fine. But I'm just playing d6 so that we could simply play the setup, like the king's Indian setup. So he moves the queen to c2. Let's just get our king up the center of the board. Remember, the plan is to play moves like e5. He plays e4. And now I'm going to play knight to d7 with the idea of playing e5. Pawn to e5 is never a move that we're going to be afraid of, by the way, because if e5, for one, we don't have to take the pawn, we could just move the knight. But two, after push takes, we could play something like knight g4, and it's going to be very hard for him to guard the pawn. So bishop to d3 was played. Now we're going to be playing pawn to d5. If takes, we're just going to be taking with either the knight or the pawn. They're both good moves. If he plays pawn to d5, however, which he did, this is the real King's Indian defense that you guys are about to see. First of all, in the King's Indian, we would also like to put a knight on the c5 square. But a lot of times when we put a knight on the c5 square, they just play b4 and chase away our knight. I'm also thinking about playing moves like knight to h5, followed by knight to f4. But I prefer for the opponent to get their king castle before I go for that plan. For now, what I'm thinking of is playing the move a5, but a5 doesn't even prevent b4. So let's just play knight b4. If he wants to play b4 and chase away my knight, let him do it. At least I could say I'm going to be taking his bishop and we're going to be having the bishop here. Okay, he decided to castle his king. Now he castled the king. We're not going to be taking this bishop just yet. I'm thinking of knight h5 followed by knight f4. I'm thinking of pawn c6. Pawn c6 is one of those breaks that you always want to think about in the King's Indian. C6 takes, and we're going to have like, yeah, let's go C6. C6 is going to help us to have very, very good development. Now, if the opponent plays pawn to C4, that's actually going to be good for us because if pawn C4 takes, A5, and there's no more B4. So B4 is actually the only move that I'm slightly afraid of here. For example, maybe he needs to move the bishop then b4, but for now, his pawn on d5 is under attack. So taking on c6, then moving the bishop so that way he's able to play b4. My knight is going to be able to get to the e6 square, so I'm not really scared of what's happening. Already, my opponent is using a lot of time off the clock, so that's already a good sign for us, which means worst case scenario, we're going to be winning on time. So he did play pawn to c4, and we are going to be taking on d5. And the reason why we're going to be taking on d5 is so that we were able to play moves like rook to c8. And if we play rook to c8, our rook is going to be on the same line as the opponent's queen. One thing to keep in mind, though, is once they take on c4, his knight is able to get to the c4 square, and then he's able to target my weak backward pawn on d6. But it's not something that I'm afraid of. So he took with the c pawn. If b4, I'm still going to take. So let's go bishop to d7 here. Bishop to d7 is to allow my rook to get access to the c file. Knight c4 would have been a nice move to target this. We spoke about that. Pawn b4, it is definitely time to get rid of that bishop. Now we could say I have the bishop here. Now if the opponent takes bishop to b5 is a move that I would love to play, but the queen covers the square, and I don't want to play a move like a6 because it's going to be obvious that I'm trying to threaten that. I'm actually thinking of knight h5. Yeah, knight h5 is more in the spirit of the King's Indian. The knight is heading to the f4 square, and this f5 move, if you didn't learn anything from this video, pawn to f5 is thematic in the King's Indian defense. Very, very thematic. It also allows our rook to get more activity. Knight c4 will be attacking this pawn. If knight c4, I am thinking about bishop b5 pinning the knight, but then there's a4. He plays rook to e1. Knight f4 hits the queen. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure why he's allowing me to play knight f4. Let's go knight f4, hits the queen. This is one of the maneuvers in the King's Indian. Pawn to g3 eventually will come, by the way, and attack my knight. But if pawn to g3 happens, there should always be ideas of knight h3. So I'm fine. Where is he going to put the queen, though? That's the thing. B1? B1 is like ugly. Nobody wants their queen on b1. That's ugly. If queen b1, I may just play pawn f5 and continue with my plan. Queen to b3 is actually not ugly. I didn't really see that his queen could go to b3. From here, we're just going to continue with our plan. I mean, if I play rook to c8 in this position, that's a nice move, but the rook doesn't immediately do anything, which is fine. But pawn to f5 also gets my rook in the game, so that's a nice move. Rook c8 would also be a decent move as well. And keep in mind, whenever this pawn moves to g3, we could check. Knight c4 was played, which is a very nice move because not only is he threatening to take on d6, there are bishop takes f4 ideas lurking around that I need to be aware of. But before I even defend on d6, I'm thinking about just taking on e4. Like if I take on e4, I'm attacking his knight, his rook is going to be forced to take. And then at that point, I'm able to hit him with bishop to f5, hit the rook. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's take on e4, hit the knight. So if he takes here, I takes here, and I'm fine. With that being said, the rook has to take. Once he takes with the rook, we play the move bishop to f5, attacking the rook, forcing the rook to move. I'm slightly scared of bishop takes, but I'm not really scared of bishop takes because if he takes, then my bishop gets this very nice diagonal attacking his rook. And because my bishop is on this diagonal, his rook could also get trapped. Now, I'm assuming he's going to pull his rook all the way back to e1. If he pulls his rook all the way back to e1, knight to d3 is definitely in the thought process. And then once the rook move, I hit him with e4. I think this is the attack that we've been waiting for. Wait, isn't this just no, 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 wait, let's think. If I play pawn to e4, hits the knight, he takes my knight, I take his knight. E4 hits the knight, he takes my knight, I take his rook, he takes my pawn. Now we're not doing that. I'm gonna play knight to d3 first. Let's hit the rook. Once the rook move, then I'll play pawn to e4, hit the knight and attack the rook. Whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. But I don't really think e4 was a good move, to be honest. Like I really don't think e4 was a good move. All my pieces are active except my c8 rook. But I don't want to bring my c8 rook in the game unless I'm bringing it in the game with tempo unless I do not have like another attacking move. So if I'm in a position where I do not have an attacking move and I need to improve the position of my pieces, then I'll play rook to c8. Otherwise, the rook will be chilling on a8 for a while. But if you're watching this video, keep in mind this rook on a8 will be going to c8. Bishop to g4 was played. Very, very nice move. A move that I did not consider. The guy's like, offense is the best defense. I'm not moving my rook. I'm attacking your queen instead. It's fine though. Let's just play queen to d7. Let's just move the queen out the way. His rook is still under attack. I'm still threatening to play e4. I'm gonna be chasing away that bishop with h6. So we are still chilling in this position. He's definitely about to lose some material. But guys, I still want you guys to keep in mind, yes, the dark squared bishop is the life of the King's Indian. But whenever you win some material, for example, I'm gonna play e4, hit the knight and hit the rook. This is called a discovered attack. Whenever you win material with your dark squared bishop, especially if the opponent still has a dark squared bishop, please don't get comfortable thinking you're ahead in material and you're going to win because you lost your dark squared bishop. So even if you lost your dark squared bishop, but you gained something for it, just be careful. I'm not saying if you got a queen with the dark squared bishop, you should not take it, but all I'm saying is be careful. Knight to h5 was played, hitting the bishop, which is not forced to move. I'm thinking of takes. I'm also thinking of bishop to g4. If both of his rooks are under attack, I should be fine. If he plays pawn to f3, bishop to d4 checks the king. If the king goes to f1, I take. And if he takes something, I take here. Double check. Okay, I'm not really seeing anything there. Sack the knight on f2, king takes on f2, not seeing anything. bg5, pawn f3, takes, rook takes. Okay, do I just play h6? I really don't want to take that rook. That's the thing. I don't want to take the rook. Okay, let me at least play h6. We're going to be playing h6, and then we're going to consider if we're going to take the rook. Because nobody believes me when I say the dark squared bishop is the life of the King's Indian. Let me fix the mic because I know you guys love to comment. Fix your audio, bro. Okay, bishop e3. Do we take the rook or do we go bishop g4? Pawn push takes, lose the knight. Can't do that. Okay, we're taking the rook. We're taking the rook in this position. We're ahead in material. We have to be careful. Our dark squares are slightly weakened. He has to play rook takes bishop. I mean, that's the only move that makes sense there. Rook takes bishop, and I'm thinking of playing queen to g7 here, guarding my pawn, hitting the rook, and then his knight is going to be attacking my d6 pawn, though. That's the thing. I don't think I'm ready to move my queen away because I need to guard my d6 pawn. But I also need to ensure that I guard my h6 pawn. So let's play the move king to h7, guarding the h6 pawn. We are weak on the dark squares, but that's fine. Knight takes f5 was played. My opponent is trading while he's down in material. We're chilling. Let's take with the pawn. Pawn to f4 is coming. My rook is also getting this open file pointing towards the king. We're just completely fine now. There's nothing to worry about. I mean, this knight on d3 is now the life of the position. He needs to get rid of my knight. For example, he needs to play moves like knight to b2. And even if he plays knight b2, I was going to hit him with qg7. So he moves his rook to d1, applying some pressure to my knight. Hit him with pawn to f4. He has to move the bishop. Hit him again with pawn to f3. If he push queen to h3 is forced checkmate. Let's hit him with pawn to f4. He has to move the bishop. If he sacks, then I would be surprised, but I'm definitely going to be taking the knight. I mean, it's more material at the end of the day. So bishop to d4 was played. He did move the bishop. Let's hit him with pawn to f3. If he pushes the pawn, then queen to h3 is a checkmate. He sacrificed the rook thinking, oh, I'm going to take the rook and then he's going to check and then I'm going to block and he's still losing. But why do I need to take the rook when I can hit him with queen to g4? Isn't this just checkmate? Queen g4, pawn g3, queen h3, that's the lowest mate. If I go here, maybe he sacked the rook again. I think that's what he's going to do. But then I'm just going to take with the pawn. What if he runs with the king? If he runs with the king, I takes king over, and eventually I'm going to take with the rook. Let's hit him with queen to g4. This is GG's. Now, not only is his rook under attack, I'm also threatening mate on g7. So he sacrificed the rook again. That's what I was expecting. Let's take knight to e3 prevents the mate and attack the queen. Okay, I was about to say, I'm threatening the mate and attacking the bishop, but he found a very nice check. And I'm not going to block with the rook because knight here is just going to be a very strong move. So I'm just going to block with the queen. And once I block with the queen, I have two rooks. He has a knight and a bishop. There's no universe that I'm not just completely winning in this position. After takes, I'm going to take back. I'm threatening this unprotected pawn. Let's takes, hit the pawn. Okay, he took here. It's very important that I do not get forked. But what if I fork him? Rook takes d5. There's no knight checks. I'm hitting the bishop and I'm hitting the knight. If he puts his bishop on c5, then I have a very nice removing the guard tactic, which is pawn b6. I could also, oh my lord, look on this, guys. Pawn b6 is a removing the guard tactic. But what if I just sacrifice my rook? If he takes my rook, his bishop is actually pinned to a checkmate. So once I play the move rook to d8, he is forced to lose his bishop. If he moves the bishop, that's a checkmate. If he stops the mate, I take the bishop and I'm winning. He took, let's just take the bishop, and this is not just completely winning. He moves the king to g2. From here, I'm just going to be taking off all his pawns, promote my pawn, and win the game. But he resigned.